Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com.
Draft Mechanic, Episode 100.
On this 100th episode of Draft Mechanic, we discuss recent plays of Hex Roller Fae, Just One, TWIXT, Bargain Quest, and My Little Scythe. We list out our top 10 games of all time. Jake has a quick beer segment on his trip to Hubbard's Cave and Année. I have a beer primer on Trappist beers, and in our final round, we answer some listener questions. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. Know that all is for the best in the best of our
Hello and welcome to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
Perhaps in powers of 10.
No, you shouldn't have that many beers.
No, I mean, one is a power of 10, right? I don't know.
Suppose.
Centennial is a hop. That's 100. Does that work? Hey,
sure.
It's Draft Mechanic's 100th episode.
Sure
it's
is.
Finally here. We've been talking about it for a while. Holy moly. Thank you all so much for tuning in for this fantastic, hopefully, 100th episode of Draft Mechanic. If you want to get in touch with us, draftmechanic.net or at Draft Mechanic on social media. You can find us on the internet and all those usual places.
We've also got a Board Game Geek Guild. That is guild number 2470. There will be a thread up there for this episode, as there is for every episode. So if you are listening to what we're saying and you have something you'd like to add to the conversation, that is the place to put it.
Yeah, Board Game Geek is also where you can pick up the Draft Mechanic micro badge, and I am so excited to announce we did it. We got to 100 micro badgers at episode 100. We have a milli badger worth of micro badgers now, so I'm very, very excited. Thank you so much, Jason Zawin, Tony McCree, Anthony Nito, and Anthony, who goes by the name Moose Stuff, not to be confused with Anthony Nito, for getting us there. That's 100. We're at 100. And please, if you want to grab the micro badge, you can still do so. If you need the Geek Gold, we got a bunch. Just jump in the guild number 2470, hop in the thread. Daniel will probably beat me to it. You are always beating me to that.
I have a desk job.
But yes, thank you so much to all 100 of our micro badgers, and especially to literally every person who's listened to the show over the last almost 4 years now, which is kind of crazy. I never really thought we'd get to 100. I always assumed we would, but I never thought about it as a thing. And here we are. That's a big number.
It's a badger army.
It's an entire army of badgers.
But very small ones.
Miniature, tiny, transportable badgers.
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we do twice monthly game nights. There is one on the first Thursday of every month and one on the third Tuesday of every month. The next one coming up is going to be on the third Tuesday in May, which is the 21st, and that is at Salud Cerveceria in the Noda neighborhood. We would love for you to come out and drink some beers or some non-alcoholic beverages if you prefer. Mm-hmm. They have got their full menu up again. They had changed over their food, and they have delicious salads and chicken wings and pizzas and all kinds of delicious things that you could possibly eat.
Oh, those meatballs.
I've not had them, but you tell me they're very good.
They're very good meatballs.
And we bring good games and good company. We would love to see you there.
Yes, and if you can't wait and or are not in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and you happen to be going to Geekway to the West, we will also be going to Geekway to the West. That is just a few weeks, actually. That's before our next episode.
It's a week and a half, yeah.
Which is crazy. So we are hosting the second annual bottle share at Geekway to the West with our friends at the Mile High Game Guys, and also Cassidy is going to be there, formerly from Board Game Blitz. She organized it last year, and she will be making it to this one as well. That is the Thursday night, 8 p.m. Information is at the website, at the Geekway event website, and also boardgames.beer/events. I cannot remember the exact room right now, but you can always go on the website and find that. But even if you don't make it by that, we would love to say hey, maybe play a game with you. Geekway is so relaxed and so chill that I just want to high-five a whole bunch of people and maybe play a bunch of Carcassonne, because we are returning to Geekway, which is where the Carcassonne began.
Speaking of things that are gonna be at Geekway, I think we have one more little piece of show news that we'd like to get through.
Yeah, I've been sitting on this one for a little while. We were waiting for the right time to do it, and episode 100 seems like the perfect time. We have a new little bit of merch. We have some enamel pins that I designed with Laura Hammond, who does Tiny Dice Buddies, which is a Kickstarter and art that I've talked about a lot in the past here on the show. Just these really cute little kawaii dice kind of style things, and Laura put together a little piece of Tiny Dice Buddies inspired draft mechanic art. So we've got a little Tiny Dice Buddy pint glass with a little D6 floating in it, and it's got the logo on the side there. And you are going to be able to pick those up at Geekway, and we'll also be selling them online after we figure out the logistics of that, so you can get them shipped to you. We're going to sell them for $5, so super affordable pin, way to show your draft mechanic love.
And have an adorable little smiling pint glass on you.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm so excited about this. I wanted to do a pin for a long time, and I'm thrilled that Laura Hammond was able to do this with us. All right, so let's get into it. Danielle, we'll start off with Kickstarter updates like we do.
Certainly. Terraforming Mars Turmoil from Stronghold Games finished at $1.37 million of its $20,000 goal with over 26,000 backers. So that's definitely going to happen. It's going to come with a lot of promo cards now, and you can late pledge over on the Kickstarter page if you're not one of the 26,000 people who's already purchased this.
That is crazy. That is a lot of money. No question.
On Mars from Eagle Griffin Games finished with $970,000 of its $100,000 goal with 10,141 backers. Likely there's going to be a late pledge manager for this one as well if you missed out on it. Anachrony Fractures in Time from Mind Clash is currently at $850,000 of its $50,000 goal with 9,300 backers. This ends on Tuesday, May 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern, and since it just crossed the 48-hour reminder email line, that number is probably going to be absolutely out of date when you go to look at the page to see how many people have backed this and what the funding level is.
Yeah.
But they've already crossed a bunch of stretch goals, including what is pretty much a giant expansion module that they're adding to this game.
Yeah.
Double Six Dice 2 from Double Six Dice has finished at $109,000 of its $15,000 goal with 4,009 backers. Hopefully you got in on this, but they should have a web store up later to buy these if you didn't get them on the Kickstarter.
Great quality dice. If you're looking for replacement D6s that roll better, I highly encourage Double Six.
Or maybe you want D12s and you just hate numbers above 7 or 7 and above.
So for new projects this episode, I've got two. First off is Cleopatra and the Society of Architects, which is coming from Mojito Studios. It's currently funding at $116,000 of its $45,000 goal with 1,273 backers. This one ends on Monday, May 27th, so 3 weeks. This has an estimated delivery of March of 2020. The fancy edition that you really want is $99, or for $119, you can include the 2 new expansions. They actually developed 2 new expansions for this game as part of this Kickstarter campaign that will work with the original edition. They are selling it if you'd want to just pick up those old expansions, or the expansions for the old edition, I guess. So that's kind of interesting. What's going on here is they're finally reprinting this 13-year-old Bruno Catala and Ludovic Malblanc design from a new studio, from Mojito Studios. This is previously a Days of Wonder title that went out of print, and just kind of everybody was like, where are we going to get this game again? And looks like Mojito found a way to do it. Production level back then was incredible. Days of Wonder early on, and you're building this giant 3-dimensional palace for Cleopatra. And
the box.
Yeah, using the box as actually part of it. And on this new design, the new edition from this new publisher, they're taking it even further. There is tons of plastic in this, a lot of different stuff, and it just looks as good as you would expect this game to look today. We talked about this game back in episode 77. It was good. It was good to play. I'm glad that we had a chance to play it. It did one thing that I really loved with the way that the cards come out. You have cards that you're, taking in your hand as resources, and it did this interesting thing where you shuffle the deck, cut the deck, and then put half the deck in upside down. So some of the stuff you knew was coming out, you would know, and the rest of them would be hidden. And there was obviously some kind of a penalty with some of the cards involved there that kind of leads into the other mechanics in the game. But I don't think I've ever seen anything else do that particular thing with the deck, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I am a little hesitant about this Kickstarter, though. This is the first Kickstarter coming from Mojito Studios, and with a game that had such excellent production quality to start with, being a first Kickstarter campaign and promising so much in this box of such high quality, I'm a little hesitant to see if they're actually going to deliver what they expect to deliver, or if they're going to hit some hiccups that they weren't expecting, having not done this before.
Yeah, no, I totally agree on that. It's going to be something to watch, but a lot of people have been waiting for this game a long time. There is a $69 level as well if you want a slightly less deluxe edition that still has a whole ton of plastic and a whole ton of building components and stuff like that. You just don't get like metal coins and 3D tokens. You get some punchboard tokens instead.
Yeah, I was going to say people have been waiting for this game, but I'm not sure they've been waiting to pay $120 for this game.
Well, yeah, Cleopatra and the Society of Architects. I'm sure we'll have an update next episode because that's kind of how we roll. puzzle.
Yes, that's what I just did a minute ago.
The other one to talk about is a game that we've actually had a chance to play. This is a game called Crystallo, coming from Lightheart Games, currently funding at $15,000 of its $4,200 goal, with 756 backers. This one ends on Saturday, June 1st, with an estimated delivery of December 2019. You can get this for $15 plus $2 shipping in the US. It's a solo abstract game from new designer Liberty Kiefer. It's a game of card placement and set collection, and it comes in a nice little cloth bag, so it's super easy to transport. Basically, what you're doing in Crystallo is you have a deck of cards that have some symbols on them. You have orbs that you're looking to surround with different sets of crystals, either all of the same color, or all of the same number, or all of different number, all of different color, any combination therein. And as you surround them, you're going to be taking crystals off of these 6 different animal cards up top. Once you clear off all those animal cards, you then go to a final phase in which you're trying to trap the black dragon. And you're also, throughout the game, hopefully going to acquire some treasures that will give you additional powers as you go later into the game. But it's a really interesting solo card placement puzzle that really does play quickly, and for the price, $15, it's a good price point for a game like this.
Yeah, we did have a chance to play this, like you said. We had a preview copy, and what I love about this is it really is a puzzle. You're making sure you leave yourself enough outs that you have orbs available to take all of the gems off of the 6 different reserve cards, but you also want to place your cards so that you are taking full advantage of all of the crystal sets that you are setting up. So you want to make sure that you've got orbs available, but you also want to make sure that you're not wasting setups that you have that you could possibly be taking a crystal from the reserve onto your board. And in the second round, when you are trying to trap the black dragon, you are using cards that were set aside from the beginning of the game, but also, depending on how well you did in that first phase, when you're trying to move the crystals, any cards you had left over in that phase are going to go into the second phase and make your second phase easier by giving you more options. So the better you do in the beginning, the better you're going to do in the end.
Yeah, the art on this was also done by the designer Liberty, and the packaging of the game, like I said, is going to come. The cards will be in a tuck box. You'll get some of those acrylic crystals that you're used to seeing in games like Diamonds or something like that, the larger ones, and it's going to come all in a nice little pouch, so super transportable. I love the price point on this. I think it's a great price point for a solo puzzly game like this. It's the kind of thing that I would really like to have in my collection and probably just throw in my travel bag anytime I'm going somewhere.
For sure.
Yeah, and thanks to Eric Yurko from What's Eric Playing for letting us get a chance at playing this. If you want to see some really great pictures of Crystallo, I would encourage you to go over to what'sericplaying.com because he did a preview of it last week as well, and you can see more about Crystallo there.
Link will be in the show notes.
All right, moving right along, it's time to talk about a whole bunch of recent plays.
Want to wear your draft mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draftmechanic for t-shirts.
Okay, so rolling into recent plays today, this one's actually a little different than usual because for once, we didn't play all of our games together, and that's kind of interesting and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, normally we go to the same game nights and oftentimes we'll play a lot of the same games together, but you were traveling a lot recently, so you got to play games. I know you played some out in California with Eric Yurko. That's how we got that Crystallo preview copy, and you also got to go to the Gaming Hoopla out in the Chicago area, correct?
Hoopla, yeah.
Meanwhile, I got to play some games with our friends here at home and run our game night so that I got to go to our game night games, and you got to play some different stuff. So we have a lot of games to talk about, and we want to share them with you.
Oh, and here they come. Daniel?
I'd also like to bring attention to the fact that you had a very nice pun that's going to get lost in the fact that we talked a long time between you saying rolling into recent plays and me talking about our first game, which is Hex Roller.
Darn it, I missed a pun. I'm sorry, Patrick.
But you didn't miss it. You gave it to me, and I brought it to everyone's attention.
So what you're saying is I rolled that pun right over to you?
You did not.
Oh, come on, give me this.
Hex Roller is a 2019 release from Pegasus Spiele, which Renegade Game Studios is bringing over to the US, I think, this month. It plays 1 to 8 players in 10 to 15 minutes.
And this is designed by Rustan Haakonsen, with art by Christian Fiore. It is a game of rolling, writing, and grouping numbers. Sounds like a roll and write to me.
Yeah, there's not a whole ton of theme here. There's also no reason why you should only play with 8 players. You can play this with as many people as you can print out little roll and write sheets for.
Did it come with pens or no?
It did not come with...
Ooh.
Did it?
I don't know.
It might have come with pencils, but you could use your own pens.
Yeah, maybe it only came with 8, and that's their trick.
Maybe. I think the thing is that there's not really a tiebreaker in this game, so if you have more than 8 people, you could have a tie, but we had that with 8 people as well, so I'm not really sure. in Hex Roller, everybody is going to start with a roll and write sheet, which is made up of spaces which are hexagons, which should not be surprising based on the name.
I'm confused. Hexagons.
The groups of hexagons are different colors. So you're going to have 6 different sort of pods of hexagons, which are each different colors, and they each have 6 hexagons around a central hexagon. And then there is a central space which has 13 hexagons, which nicely holds all the little pods of 7 hexagons. And that is a 7th color. It is orange. Each of the little pods or the central space has some numbers already printed on there. And the numbers are going to be from 3 to 8. You're also going to get with this game 8 6-sided dice. They are, some of them, different colors. I mean, I guess they're all groups of different colors, but the colors don't matter, which is sort of where I'm going with that. I don't know what they're doing with them. I think Bert, who was the person in our group who had bought this, said that it was maybe going to be used in expansion content later, but right now you've got a bunch of different colors of dice, and the fact that they're different colored, completely irrelevant.
Whose role is this anyway?
You are going to, at the beginning of each of the rounds of the game, and there are 7 rounds in the game, you're going to roll these 8 dice and group them by number. So maybe you have 2 3s, 2 4s, a 5, a 6, and 2 7s, and no 8s. Everybody is going to get the option to take 2 of the groups of numbers. So maybe you take 3s and 4s. In that example, you would write 2 3s and 2 4s onto your hexagon grid. The rules about placement are that you have to write a number next to an existing number that is the same value, and you have to connect the entire group that you are adding in that turn together. So you can't put a 3 next to one of the existing 3s and then move across the board and put the other one next to another existing 3. They have to be connected. You are going to do this 7 times, always selecting 2 sets of numbers, unless you use one of these special bonuses that allow you once during the game to take an additional group of numbers or to add a number to the grouping that you had. So if you took 2 3s, you would be able to place 3. There are 3 bonuses, and if you don't use them at the end of the game, you're going to get points for having them. Then you are going to look at the grid that you've scored in, and every colored section that you've completed, you are going to write down the number which has the majority of the spaces in it. So if I had completed the yellow section, which is 7 hexagons, and I had 4 3s and then a variety of different numbers, 3 would be the number which had the most instances in that section, so I would get 3 points for the yellow section. And you're going to continue adding in those points for every section that you've completed. There is also additional points if you have completed the orange section. When you score the majority in that number, since it is bigger, it has 13 hexes in it, you will double the number. It also starts with the lowest values in it, so you're going to have to connect those numbers that are lower. If you have any of the pre-printed numbers on your board which are connected by a row of the same number, so if I connect both the pre-printed 8s with a row of 8s, I'm going to get that value in my score. The way the numbers are written on the board, you can't really connect all of them, so you will be focusing as you're placing your numbers on connecting the higher value numbers. And then if you have placed a straight of numbers in either your first picks of each of the rounds or your second picks of each of the rounds. So if I select a group of 3, a group of 4, and a group of 5 in my top row, but I never select a group of 6, you're going to get the highest value in that straight. You'll add up all those points, and whoever has the highest value wins. That's how you play Hex Roller.
Sounds like a pretty standard, variation on roll and fill in things on your piece of paper sheet, yeah?
Yeah, there's absolutely no theme here, and they don't even try to pretend that there is, which I guess is to its advantage. They're not going to be discredited for not appropriately having a theme if they don't put a theme on it at all. But I like the way that they score the game. There's enough interesting choices about how you have to place the numbers when you score things that it doesn't feel like any of the other place the numbers in random non-theme spaces roll and writes that we've played, and we've played quite a few of them. Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting. There's nothing about this game that makes it intrinsically better than any of those other themeless roll and writes, but it's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, and if this is your type of game, this is certainly something to look at if you pick up a lot of them.
Okay. So, I'll probably play it a few times and maybe move on from there.
Yeah, that's about where this game is.
I don't know. I'm kind of wondering if there's more room for non-interesting roll and writes or not, themeless roll and writes. I feel like we're getting, like Welcome to and Railroad Inc., games that have some theme to them and make it kind of exciting or interesting and tie them in some way. And I wonder how many more completely non-themed random writers we can have in the world.
I mean, we can have a completely infinite number. People will keep designing them.
How about that?
Yeah. And I wonder if they had found a way to make this thematic, if it would have been a little bit more, sticking in your mind. But at the same time, the stretch that you would have had to have gone on without completely changing this game feels like it probably, like we would have been saying, well, why didn't they just use numbers? It would have made sense with numbers.
Yeah, true.
Or symbols, but people don't like drawing symbols. But it was certainly a fine game, and if you need a game for a big group of people, a roll and write's always a good choice, because like I said, you can play it really with as many people as you have writing implements and sheets. But this sort of left me wanting a little bit more. I don't know why.
All right, well, that is Hex Roller. So up next, you've got Fae, F-A-E, a 2018 release from Z-Man Games. It plays 2 to 4 players in 30-ish minutes. This is designed by Leo Colovini, with art by Atha Kanai, Brie Linzo, Samuel R. Shimota, Dan Gerlach, and Paul Kluka. This is a game of strategic movement, bluffing, and little druid dudes.
I also would like to point out that if you go to BGG, there's no listed artist, and this game is all about the art, so that felt very bad to me. So I listed everybody who is even remotely involved in the art in the rulebook on that. Sorry about that. In Fae, you have a map which is divided into regions, and each of the regions has 5 land areas in it. At the start of the game, you're going to put 1 druid of the multiple colors of druids out. There are, I believe, 5 colors of druids. You're going to put 1 out onto each of the spaces on the board. They don't have to match in color or anything. You're just going to randomly distribute them. Then everybody is going to get a secret color of druid, which is their color of druid. And you're going to know it, but nobody else should know it. Don't tell other people. That's a bad idea.
Secrets.
Then you are going to take turns moving druids or groups of druids around the board. You are going to move a group of druids from the section that they are in to an adjacent section which has at least 1 other druid in it. So you're essentially consolidating the groups of druids. When you reach the point where a group of druids is completely surrounded by empty spaces, they are going to perform a ritual. And at that point, you are going to remove those druids from the board, and you are going to take the ritual card of the lowest value, which is sitting on the side of the board. There are more low-value ritual cards, but as you complete rituals, you will go into higher-value ritual cards, and when you run out of ritual cards, or you can move none of the druids, the game is over. There are a couple of interesting things about the way these rituals work. If they are on the cursed terrain type of the current ritual card that you would be taking, those druids are just removed, and you will still get the ritual card, but you don't get any additional druid points. The other way that the ritual can be tweaked is that if all 5 colors of druids are on the space when the ritual occurs, any single druids are removed, and then using the remaining druids that are left, you will determine who gets the points for the ritual, which color of druid, because you're not collecting points for yourself, you're collecting points for the specific color of druid. The points are going to go to whichever color of druid has the majority of meeples on the space when the ritual occurs, and you're going to add the value which is on the ritual card. So like I said, you start with lower number ritual cards, adding lower amounts, and you go up to higher numbers. I think the highest one is 5. You will also get a point for every druid that is remaining on that space. That's after you remove any single druids if it is all the 5 colors. At the end of the game, everybody's going to turn over their secret druid color cards, and whoever had the card with the druid, which is the highest value, is going to be the winner of Fae.
Yeah, so we walked by and looked at this actually at Geekway last year, and kind of just got a little, run through of move this around, and you've actually had a chance to play it now.
Yeah, friends of ours had picked it up, and I got to play with them.
Yeah, it looked really pretty.
Yeah, and I think the art, like I said, is a very strong point in this game. Other than that, it is certainly just a game of isolating individual pieces, and they could have been any kind of pieces again, but you are trying to collect these druids so that you're not giving away which color you want to win, because if you give away and everybody knows, like, oh, you're the yellow druids, everybody's just going to tank the yellow druids, so they're always either removed from the board or they get low-value ritual cards, or they're in rituals that occur on the cursed land, so they just get removed from the board and don't get any of the additional points. it's important to sort of bluff which is yours, but at the same time, leave yourself in a position where other people are inclined to move your druids into rituals that they are going to get a bunch of points for. And the tiebreaker at the end of the game is having the fewest ritual cards, but at the end, you're going to add to your score the values on your ritual cards after you reveal what your secret color is. So you want to be creating enough rituals that you're going to get a bunch of points at the end of the game, but not creating so many that A, you're giving away the information as to which is your druid, just by the way that you are setting up the rituals, and that if there's a tiebreaker, you want to make sure that you're in a position to win that with the fewer ritual cards. It was fun, but I think if I was going to play this sort of bluffing and deduction style game with a map and with map movement, I think I'd rather play something like Cryptid, which is an absolutely great game. This was it was a fine game, but it didn't make me want to play it again.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen yet slid off this game a bunch of times. Like I see it, on a game library or out a demo somewhere, and I just kind of look at it, I'm like, oh, that's pretty. But from listening to the description, there's nothing in there that I desperately need to get in on. I feel like there's other games that are doing that kind of conceal what you're actually trying to do better.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, well, that is Faye. So let's move on. I hear you got just one more for us?
I do have just one more for you. It is
two.
Just One.
Yes, Just One, 2018 release from Refos Productions for 3 to 7 players. It plays in 20 minutes. This is designed by Ludovic Rowdy and Bruno Salter, with art by Eric Azaguri. This is a game of deduction, being obvious, but not being too obvious.
Yeah, and I feel like I've had some games that I've been kind of meh on, so I wanted to talk about one that I'm very excited about.
I'm glad you could find one. Just one to talk about. Moving right along.
Yes, let's please. In Just One, you are going to start out with 13 cards which have clues on them. And the person whose turn it is to guess is going to flip up one of these cards so it is facing everybody else at the table. And they're going to select a number 1 to 5, which will correspond to one of the words which is on the card in front of them. So everybody else can see the word that's been selected. Let's say the word is ruler. Well, everybody else is going to take their little plastic stand and write on the back of it, so nobody can see what everybody else is writing, one word that they think will get the person who flipped up the card to guess that their word is ruler. Once everybody has written down their one word on the back of their little plastic thing, you're all going to flip them around but not show the person who's guessing yet. Any words that are duplicated are going to be flipped face down so that the guesser doesn't get to see those words. So you want to come up with a clue that is unique enough that you're not going to have to remove it from the clues, but that's useful enough that this person who has no idea what the word is going to be able to guess what the heck you're talking about. In the case of ruler, maybe one person will write inches and one person will write centimeters, somebody else may write straight, somebody else may write Elizabeth. Because Elizabeth is a ruler and that's spelled the same way and you don't know which way that you want to take it. Then once any duplicates have been removed, the person who has to guess, who had the card in front of them, will look at all of the clues that are still in the game and they'll get one guess. If they get it correctly, you get that card into your score pile and you just move on to the next person who gets a card. If they guess incorrectly, you are going to remove not only the card that was in front of them, but the next card from your score pile. So you have a maximum score of 13, but every time you mess up, you're going to remove 2 from that score pile.
I see.
Then the next person will take a card, and you're going to repeat this until you run out of cards and find out what your score was. This game seems so simple, but it is absolutely amazing, particularly if you've got the higher end of the play count. They say 3 to 7, and the person who owned the game was saying that it works way better with 7 than it did with like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I can imagine playing this with 3 would be really tough.
Particularly if 2 of the players think fairly similarly, because then you're just going to be getting one clue every round.
Yeah.
But at the same time, even when you have a whole bunch of people and you feel like you should be getting a lot of clues, that can go very poorly. Mm-hmm. One of the examples is we were playing with our friend Tamara, who is in our Time Stories spoiler episodes. You guys have talked or heard her talk before. Mm-hmm. And she got the word Starbucks. I will point out it was capitalized and had an S at the end. So it was definitely the coffee shop.
Pretty clear.
But we wrote out all the clues and everybody was terrified to write anything to do with coffee because they were afraid it was going to be duplicated. So the only person in our group who wrote anything to do with coffee was Bert, and he wrote mocha. Mm-hmm. I wrote Mermaid, which had something to do with the Starbucks coffee company, but wasn't to do with coffee. And then several of the other players at the table, two players wrote Venti, which would have been really helpful, but 2 players wrote Venti. One person wrote Pilot because they were thinking of Battlestar Galactica, and one person wrote Ahab because they were thinking of Moby Dick, both of which have characters named Starbuck in them. But Tamara looked at this mess of words. She's got Mermaid, Ahab, and Pilot, which all seem like they could be people, and she's got Mocha. And she, I mean, to her credit, she gave it a good go, but she did not guess Starbucks, which is reasonable. But at the same time, like, we're all sitting there going, anybody could have written coffee. None of us wrote coffee. And that's the kind of the fun feeling you get from this game. And like you said, it's 20 minutes. It goes really, really quick. You can play another round if you want, which would have been just equally as fun, or you can just move on. It's a great filler game. It's a great party game. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I've been wanting to play this one for a while, but it's just never really come around at the right time. And of course, when y'all get to play it, I'm out of town. But thankfully, it's also a thing you can purchase on the internet. So maybe we now have just one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like less than $25 on Amazon. So,
So yeah, that is just one. So, my turn?
Yeah, your turn.
So while I was on vacation, like we spoke of, I actually had an opportunity to go to a small little gaming convention in the northern Chicago suburb. This is a convention called the Gaming Hoopla. It takes place in April of each year, and you can go to gaminghoopla.com for more information on this. But it's a local open gaming convention that's been going on for over a decade. The event is in support of cancer charities, and this year was in support of Aurora Cancer Care, and the con was able to raise over $26,000 for that charity.
Oh, do they do different charities every year?
They've done other ones in the past, but they've been doing Aurora Cancer Care for a little while now.
Okay.
So in addition to open and scheduled gaming, the Gaming Hoopla also has a really large play-to-win section, a really nice free games library, a massive raffle, and a silent auction. So I put some tickets in the raffle. I didn't win anything there, but they had, like, you know, all the new hotness games were available. There was a giant Azul in there. There was a full, complete everything Fireball Island, and a bunch of other really interesting stuff, and a lot of that was donated from publishers and also from attendees and organizers, which is a really awesome thing to do. The silent auction, however, had probably hundreds upon hundreds. It might have been like 700 games total.
Dang.
Yeah, it was jam-packed, you know, shelves upon shelves, stuff piled on the floor, all this stuff. But I was walking around there because I just wanted to see what was in there. And this is very first getting in there. One of the things I found was an older game called TWIXT, TWIXT. And I've actually been looking to play this for a while. It's a really old abstract game, and it's one of those things that, like, you never really expect to find. It's in some kind of legal drama, so it can't get reprinted. But there were like 3 different copies of it in the library, so for $10 buy it now from the silent auction, I'm like, yeah, I'll take a spin on that.
TWIXT is a 1962 game from 3M Bookshelf series. This is actually a series that we have another of the games in, so I'm sure it looked very familiar when you saw it on the silent auction shelf. It plays 2 or 4 players in about 30 minutes. The designer is Alex Randolph, and it is a Go-like abstract game with root connection and pegs and wrenches.
Yeah, I didn't include artist on this because there is no artist credited, and boy, is this an old game that doesn't have a lot of information on it, on the box or on the internet. But anyway, TWIXT, you get a plastic pegboard that is square. You have red lines on one side and the opposing side, black lines on the other opposing sides. One player will be black, one player will be red. If you play in teams, you play in teams. But on your turn, your only move is place a peg into the board, and your goal is to connect your black line to the other black line or red to red using peg placement. And every time you place a peg that is within 2 up, 1 over of another peg, you place a wrench on top of that and basically create a connected line. Your goal is to make a full line all the way from one side to the other, and that is it. That's the entire rules of the game. You place a peg. If anything is created, you put wrenches down. You cannot cross over anything else, and you cannot obviously place on other players' pegs. So I picked this up, and I actually sat down in the open gaming. I didn't have a chance to meet up with anybody I knew yet, and started looking at the rules for Crystallo. And attendee walked up and looked down. He saw TWIXT. He's like, I haven't seen that game in 20, 30 years. And I'm like, yeah, I just found it over there. Have you played it before? He says, yeah, I played this a whole bunch when I was younger. I'm like, you want to show me how to play this game? And he says, yeah. He sits down and we start to unpack. And I said, you're going to destroy me at this, aren't you? And he said, yeah, probably. And oh boy. So we played 3 games of it, and I did middlingly at best. But it is the purest of strategy abstract games. I say it's Go-like in that it has that really incredible learning curve that if you play this game hundreds upon hundreds of times, you're going to learn so much more about it and the way that, the strategy is going to work and how you can look like 10 moves ahead. And even though I got absolutely walloped 3 times in a row by this attendee, I just had a whole heck of a lot of fun with this. It's so cool to go back and see classic games that really impacted the hobby and probably gave a lot of people a lot of ideas moving forward. So like any other placing a line, making a route that you can't cross over game probably had roots somewhere in TWIXT, this game being over 50 years old at this point.
Well, that's hard to say. I mean, people have been drawing lines for a very, very long time.
Yeah, true. But long ago, Alex Randolph decided to put them onto this board game that has been kind of one of those ever-present things in the background of board game history. And I think Gaming Hoopla, and specifically like a silent auction like that, is the perfect place to be able to come into contact with some of this stuff. There was a lot of other really great stuff available in that silent auction.
Well, that sounds really cool. What else did you get into while you were up there?
On that first night, that's pretty much all I was able to get into. I did actually, no, I wandered by and got to play a game of Tiny Towns, which is new from AEG. I want to get more plays of that before I talk about it, since it's got a lot going on in there I think it's worth talking about.
Okay.
But I came back next morning on Saturday, and it started to really fill up. They had maybe 400 or 500 people, it felt like, coming to this convention, kind of like the Whose Turn Is It Anyway size convention. I wandered around and really just kind of looking for people that had the Players Wanted sign up, because they had a lot of, the Players Wanted or Teacher Wanted sign. And I wandered into a game of Bargain Quest. And this is another one that we had talked about in the past, but have not had a chance to get to yet.
Yeah, I think we talked about it in the Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
Bargain Quest is a 2017 release that was originally self-published, but is now from Renegade Games, that plays 2 to 6 players in 30 to 60 minutes. The designer is Jonathan Ying, and the artist is Victoria Ying. This is a game of card and hand-to-shop management, and kind of bidding in a way.
Yeah, a little bit of kind of thematic bidding. So in Bargain Quest, you are a shopkeeper in a fantasy world, and you're kind of like the NPC shop that all of the adventurers come into before they go off and fight a monster. Each round of the game, you're going to have some heroes out in front of you, and they're going to be of one of different classes, and they're going to have specific, things that they can be attracted to your shop to get. You have your little shop board, and you're going to have a bunch of different goods cards that are going to be one of those kinds of classes. They're going to have a selling price, and they're going to have a special effect that will help that particular hero when they go off to fight whatever boss you have available at that particular round. There's 3 different rounds of bosses, and they'll progress as you go on, get harder and harder, so on and so forth. But at the beginning of each round, you're going to take a look at all of your cards, and you're going to decide to put one of those into your shop window. Everybody does this secretly, with the knowledge that what you place in your shop window cannot be sold to any hero that's attracted into your shop. Yeah, it's really interesting.
That's not how stores work.
Well, I mean, it's, it draws you in and then they bait and switch you. That's actually how a lot of shops work, I guess.
Fair enough.
So when you all flip over your cards, you're going to be evaluating from the number of stars on the cards. Stars are like the attractiveness of that item, how much they draw people in. So if you have the item that has 3 stars, it's like, oh, wow, that's so cool. I got to go look at it. Maybe it's a shiny new fantasy iPod. I don't think that's actually in the game, but it's that kind of effect. And if you have you get to pick first, and then if the classes on that particular item match any of the heroes up there, you can attract a hero of your choice into your shop. After everybody chooses their heroes, everybody's going to take a look at their hero, how much money they have to spend, and the items that are remaining in their shop, because obviously you can't sell your iPod out of the fancy window. You have to sell them all of the Zunes and stuff you've got. I don't know. I'm just going with a metaphor here, guys. We're going to keep rolling on. So you've got your Zunes, and you're trying to sell your fantasy Zunes to this particular hero, and you will spend all of the money possible in this particular hero, and then it'll equip them with a whole bunch of Zunes and another MP3 player, and they will go off and fight whatever baddie there is at the end.
Equipped only with the Zunes and a non-name brand MP3 player?
I don't know. I can't remember the name of another MP3 brand player at this point. But they're going to go up against whatever monster it is, and if for some reason they're able to throw their Zune at the monster and do enough damage, they will do a hit to the monster, and if the monster attacks them back but they don't have enough defense, they'll die. But if they do have enough defense, they live, and that's good, because then they come back with some treasure, go back into the pool again, and all that begins again. Once the monster's killed, everybody else that was there gets some treasure, goes back to the heroes come back to the center of town, and it all starts again and again. So you're also going to be getting some prestige points and stuff as you go through the game by selling and also equipping heroes that come back alive and or do damage to the monster. The goal is to get prestige points, but you will also get prestige points for money, so it's important that you're managing the amount of money you personally have taken off of heroes while also getting the right stuff into the hero's hands. You don't personally get too damaged if a hero dies out there. You just don't get more points because you already have their money. That's probably going to be all right?
Probably.
And the game will continue until you get through that third monster, and then you count up all of your prestige and decide who is the best shopkeeper and who is the worst shopkeeper. And also the spaces in between, you'll decide them too.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
This has been, again, something that's been on my radar for a long time. Never had a chance to play it. I think when we talked about it on the Kickstarter segment long back, I was like, oh man, I really kind of want to kickstart this, but I also know Renegade's putting it out in the near future, and I'll probably find a way to get it then. But I will say, it's a really good game, and it is a lot of fun, and it's really interesting to make the decisions of what am I going to put in my shop window. I need to bluff and also bid both with the number of stars and the classes. So I might have a really cool item that has a bunch of stars on it, but I don't want to get that particular hero, and that hero will be the one that comes to it. Because if it's only the Ranger class, for example, and this item has 3 stars but only Ranger, and I put that in my shop window, I'm going to take the Ranger. You have to take that person, and it's not a good hero. They've got $5 and they're not going to buy anything, and they're pretty weak, and they're going to get their butt kicked. So you kind of like, oh, maybe I'll just try to sell this to somebody and I'll put this other item out, but it's only got 1 star. And then it comes around to that, reveal and everybody's taking their heroes. And you're like, well, now I got this bard. What am I going to do with a bard? They're going to sing a song. Hopefully it's about my store. Maybe a bard sings a song about a store. That would be a good thing for us.
Free advertising.
Yeah, free advertising.
This feels a little bit like a combination of some of the mechanics in Boss Monster and in Battle Merchants, obviously. That is the first thing that jumps to mind. Yeah. Boss Monster with the attraction of the heroes section, because in that game, your dungeon is going to attract heroes depending on what's in it, and you may not necessarily want a specific hero because it's not going to make it all the way through the dungeon and you're not going to get points, but at the same time, based on what you have set out, that's what you're going to get, and you're going to get all of them.
Yeah.
So that feels like it feels similar to sort of that baiting part, but again, Battle Merchants, where you're trying to equip these people and you really just want them to buy what you have, and if they make it out the other side, all the better, but not really the important part.
No, I think that's a really, really good comparison. And frankly, this takes all of the randomness that annoyed me about Boss Monster and eliminates a lot of that, because you're also going to be drafting your item cards at the beginning of each round, and then you have the agency decide what you're going to put out and what you're going to keep in your store. There's a lot more interesting decisions in Bargain Quest than there are in Boss Monster, which is really just hope this card's going to work and we'll put this in one, we'll see what happens. And like you said, with the Battle Merchants comparison, does have a lot of that I'll sell to whoever as long as they give me the money. You do obviously want those heroes to survive because you get a little more prestige off of them. They come back stronger and better for the next round. But yeah, pretty good comparison there. I think that 30 to 60 minute playtime is totally reasonable as well. And this is something that I would like to have in the collection at some point. I feel this is a great game to take to a game night. This is one that I could easily teach to new players. And it's a little more exciting than your basic gateway game because it's got a bunch of different mechanics involved in there that make it kind of a joy to play at any skill level.
And that is Bargain Quest.
So also on Saturday, I had signed up for a number of tournaments because they were doing tournaments of a bunch of different random games. I played Wordsy as a tournament. I played New York Slice as a tournament. I did not do particularly well in any of these things. I also played Ice Cool as a tournament, and true to form with Ice Cool, we set it up. I showed everybody how to do a jump shot. It was awesome. Perfect shot all the way across the board, and then I completely failed to make another shot through the remainder of the entire tournament.
Sounds about right.
But as we were waiting for the Ice Cool tournament to start at 2 o'clock, I was sitting with some people we played the Wordsy tournament with, and we had maybe 50 minutes to kill until Ice Cool started. So we're talking with them, and somebody said, well, hey, you want to play My Little Scythe? And I'm like, yes, I do want to play My Little Scythe, but we have 50 minutes until this Ice Cool tournament. I don't think that's going to work. And he said, trust me, I'll be right back.
My Little Scythe is a 2018 release from Stonemaier Games, which plays 1 to 6 players in, as just advertised, 45 to 60 minutes. It is designed by Hobie and Vienna Chow, and the artists are Katie Cow and Noah Edelman. This is Scythe, but in the cutest way.
Yeah, I think that's really the way to describe it. So I am amazed this game played in the time that it did. We really got it done in 45 minutes. So if you have played Scythe in the past, then you know basically how the game is going to work. You have a large world map in front of you. This one's a lot smaller and cuter, obviously, than basic Scythe, because my little Scythe. And you're going to have 2 player tokens that are going to be your avatars on the board. They're going to move around to different spaces to collect resources. You have apples and you have gems, and hopefully you want to deliver those to the palace that's replaced the factory in this one, because that's one of the different ways that you can get trophies. This is a game all about trophies, and you need to have 4 of them. The trophies replace your power stars, or the influence stars in base Scythe.
Your Stonemaier stars?
Yeah, the Stonemaier stars. On your turn, you're going to choose one of the actions on your board. You have 3 different action spaces to choose from. You can move your people, you can craft, which allows you to upgrade your action spaces, or you can seek, which is how resources are generated on the board. Just like in Big Mean Fancy Adult Scythe, you can't take the same action space more than once in a row. You have to continually change what you do from turn to turn, which honestly I really like. That's one of my favorite aspects of Scythe, is that you're forced to do different things instead of just jam on one action space again and again.
You can't be Russia in My Little Scythe?
Thankfully, no. But everybody has the same starting point as well, so there's no variable player stuff you have to worry about in the beginning of My Little Scythe, because this is, like you probably understand, a version of Scythe that is geared towards younger players. The designer Hobie Chow designed it with his 4-year-old daughter, Vienna Chow, because they loved Scythe so much. He loved it, and she was really interested in it, but obviously couldn't handle that level of complexity, so they designed it together and simplified the rule set a lot to make this really interesting and available to a wide range of people. So playing this game was a surprisingly awesome experience. It works so stellarly well at putting what I love about Scythe into a small format like that. Not that I need to have this or I want to bring it out all the time. I would always still prefer to play Scythe, but I feel like if you have family that wants to play this, if you have kids that want to play this, this is a perfect opportunity to get them into games like this that have action selection and moving around on a map and a lot of other options like that.
Okay, it's good to hear that it is a nice option for people who definitely need that option, but you are very much in the camp, if you do not have children, this is probably something you can pass on?
Yeah, if you don't have children, you can pass on it, but I would say, if somebody asked you to play this, you should play this.
Okay.
That's kind of how I feel about it. Like, if we go hang out with Shane and his family, and they want to play My Little Scythe, I will absolutely play that with him and his kids.
Okay, cool.
So, stuff like that. My Little Scythe, exceptionally good. So, throughout the rest of the weekend, I got to play a bunch of other fun stuff, both new to me and old. I got a chance to play Carcassonne the City again. I had actually brought it out there because Brent from Elf Creek Games has been wanting to play this for a while. We happened to meet up there. Also ran into Mike from Elf Creek Games as well. Unsurprisingly, they came up together. They were doing demos all weekend of Atlantis Rising that they were hoping to have out maybe for conventions later this year. They're not 100% sure on that yet, so I want to keep it vague. I also finally got to meet in person Paul Imboden, one of our long-term listeners and friends of the show. So awesome. A shame we didn't get to play a game together, but I'm sure we'll run into Paul again at some point.
Paul, a man whose name we've been mispronouncing for months.
I got you, man. I got you. I understand it. And my overall experience with the Gaming Hoopla is that this is such a fantastic, calm, welcoming convention that if you are in that area or if you happen to be traveling through Chicago inexplicably and you can, go to this. It's for a great cause. It was run by great people. It was super well organized. There's tons of stuff to do at the convention with scheduled events and also the raffle, the silent auction, and other tournaments. Like, it was really crazy stuff like that you really should be able to get in on something like this.
Well, listening to your experience, I'm even more excited to go to Geekway now.
Oh yeah, and it was actually kind of funny. Another thing, the tournaments that we talked about throughout the thing here, a lot of them fed into Geekway. So like the Ice Cool, the people who won Ice Cool get tickets to Geekway and will be in that Ice Cool tournament there. I did not win any of the tournaments. Thankfully.
That's fine. You already had tickets to Geekway.
Thankfully, I already have my tickets to Geekway. So, Gaming Hoopla, if I can, I will be back next year. Y'all rocked it. Congratulations on another successful year raising money to battle cancer. All right. Well, that was a significant amount of recent plays, so I think it is time for us to move on to the big ol' feature. It is the first time in 100 episodes we have talked about our top 10 games.
We would like to give a huge thanks to our sponsors, Grey Fox Games, in this, our 100th episode. From Gunnar the Viking's trip to Mars to discussing our moon goals, we've covered a lot of awesome thematic games over the episodes.
Not only have we had a lot of fun talking about Grey Fox Games, we've had fun rebuilding lost mechanical wonders in City of Gears, deducing who killed who with a venomous scorpion and left vegetables behind in Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, and drawn perfect rows of square lettuce with Pip the Pig in Harvest Dice.
And the future looks just as bright, with Viking-style ransacking and pillaging in Reavers of Midgard, or two-player asymmetric card maneuvering in War of the Worlds: The New Wave.
To stay in the loop with what's coming from our monochromatic pals, sign up for their newsletter at greyfoxgames.com and follow them on Twitter at greyfoxgames as well.
Hopefully, we'll also learn more about their moon goals there.
And if Gunnar will ever return from war.
Nope.
Grey Fox Games. Quality games, cleverly crafted. Okay, so, episode 100. It's time for us to do something a little wild and crazy, the thing that a lot of people do on their board game podcasts. We're going to give our top 10s of all time.
I don't like that you made me do this.
This is the first time we've ever done a top 10 of all time. We obviously do our year-end recaps, which have been, pretty fun. We started doing the mid-year redux this last year and did a top 10 of the previous year, but we've never really tackled a top 10 list of our personal games, and I feel pretty good that we haven't done it yet, and I feel pretty prepared to do it now.
Oh, I
guess.
don't. I wish we had continued to not do it.
What do you feel not prepared about with this?
You just saw me revise my list. I don't like my list.
That's fine. I've been working on my list over the last few days as well, and frankly, I got to the point where I ran it through the sorter, I looked at it, and I said, well, this is what my brain told me is correct, so I guess this is what we're going to go with.
That is the Pub Maple sorter that we both used, I believe, just to
absolutely.
give them credit for allowing us to do this thing that,
it's such a
that
great
we've
tool.
done.
Yeah, so should we start off with a few honorable mentions? Talk about that kind of 11 to 20 spot of games that people probably expect to hear about, but have not come up in either of our lists.
Certainly.
You got a few you want to single out?
I would like to talk about, obviously, my 11. I feel like if you're that close to the top 10 list, you should probably be mentioned, so that would be Near and Far.
Okay.
Largely because of the fun that we had playing it in addition to the excellent story that's in the game. Mm-hmm. The game gave you story to run with, and then in our playthrough, we played through with our friend Tamara, and she was the evil robot, and that sort of created its own meta at our table. And it was just a really good fun time. We've gone back and played the game since we finished the campaign, which was really nice. We did some of the character arcs. I really enjoyed it, just apparently not enough for it to be in my top 10 games.
My number 11 is not too terribly surprising if people have heard me talk about it over the last few episodes. It is Coimbra, one of my favorite games of last year, and it's coming in at 11. I just got a chance to play this again at Geekway. Just really great dice selection, action selection, a lot of cool synergies and stuff, and it just continues to be a perennial solid. I don't think it's bad to have a game be number 11 on your list at all.
Coimbra came in at 28 for me.
Oh, okay.
For whatever my list is worth. Pre-revision, it was 28.
So also in my honorable mention area, I've got Vinos, I've got Nakmal was the highest Random that I had.
Really? I expected that to be in your top 10.
Cryptid also did not make it in my top 10. It's in this section. Coldwater Crown, another one that was close, but not quite there. I'm excited to see what kind of stuff ends up in this section for you as well.
Yeah, Cryptid was 22 for me. I also wanted to add to my honorable mentions Azul, which is 13, and Agra, which is 14. Two games which have very little in common other than the fact that they're both four letters and start with A, and that I like both of them, but they just didn't make it in. Agra probably because it is so difficult to get to the table. It is, if you do not know how to play it, a 4-hour game easy, and it has lots of really interesting things about it, but just getting it to the table, I feel like if I had gotten more chances to play it, I would probably have pushed it up a little bit, but we still own it, so still time.
Still there. All right, should we get into it?
Sure.
So I will start us off with my number 10. It is a game we've already talked about. It is Near and Far, the 2017 release from Red Raven Games, designed by Ryan Lockett, with art by Ryan Lockett. What a surprise. This is something that, like you said, we played with Tamara, and we played as a campaign. We went through the whole campaign. We've played other games of it. We've played expansion stuff of it. And this is really the pinnacle of Ryan Lockett's design to me. He's done such an amazing job building the world over these last few games. And this one really ties it all together. You get the story that you wanted. You got the really good mechanics that you want. You got a really cool sense of progression as you go through each of the individual games, and then progression a little bit with your personal character as well, as you get some cool new skills that give you some special abilities, but never really unbalances anything. I feel like for the campaign, for the three of us, this was competitive all the way to the end.
It was competitive, certainly, at the end. I think at the beginning it was absolutely a runaway for Tamara. She was just schooling us, but we manage to fight back into it,
Yeah.
which is another good thing, that you can do that in a campaign.
The other thing that I think is really strong about Near and Far is that this is a campaign game we continually felt compelled to finish, which is something that's been a struggle with a lot of legacy-style games. We're still trying to finish up Charterstone. We never wanted to look back at Pandemic Legacy. Seventh Continent is, still on our to-do list, especially with the expansion content on the way in the near future.
Yeah, I think we'll finish Charterstone. It's just a matter of getting people's schedules all gotten together, but we made sure that Near and Far got finished. It took a little longer than we all would have wanted, but it got done, and we saw the campaign through to the end, and I agree with you. That speaks highly of the game.
Yeah, well, that is my number 10, Near and Far.
My number 10 is certainly a little bit older than Near and Far. It is a game that is helped along a lot by the version of it we have, and I'm not entirely sure how much we're supposed to talk about that, but it is Bonanza.
Okay.
The game of theoretically bean trading.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk about the other version.
Okay. It is a game that I really like because, it seats a lot of people. You can play Bonanza with a full table of people. You don't have to have just 4, which is the maximum for a lot of card games. And also because that game lives in the table talk. You can't sit quietly during a game of Bonanza and expect to do anything decently. And that fun, that conversation that it generates between the players in that trading phase where what'll you give me for this? I know you want this green bean. What are you going to give me for that green bean? How about if I tell you to uproot those because I want you to plant this green bean, but I'll give you something that you really want later on. And that fun back and forth is really what I love about it. All of our friends have always had a great time playing this game, so that obviously boosts it up for me. And we have a version that was, I think it was like a Game Crafter version that has remedied the problem of the bean art, which it's got some problems. I'm not a big fan of the original art for this game, but even with the bad art, that game kept coming to the table over and over and over again for us. And with the pretty art that we have on it now, it definitely comes out a lot, even having played it a ton. And for us, stuff that is old that comes back to the table automatically bumps it up the list for me. That is my number 10, Bonanza. My number 9 is actually in a similar category. It's also a card game, and it's also not exactly Cult of the New. It is Race for the Galaxy.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which is a game I absolutely love playing because I know how to play it already. And because we have friends that already know how to play it. I've heard numerous people say they love to play this game, but only with people who know how to play it, because teaching people the iconography, while I don't think it's the end of the world, lots of people seem to think it's the end of the world to teach somebody how to read the fairly straightforward, if complicated, iconography in this game. I really enjoy it, especially with the first expansion, which throws in a bunch of stuff. But if you are looking for a lot of content that you can add to a game, this game has a lot of content that's already out there. Some of it good, some of it not good. But just the base game, or the base game plus that first expansion, is really super fun. I like it at 4 or 5, maybe. You can play a whole big group, but I really like to play Race for the Galaxy. It is so interesting to decide when you're going to use a card for the effect and when you're going to use it as currency. And everything you do in that game, you're giving something up to be able to do it. And that decision, as simple as it is, I remember it was one of the first modern board game card games that we had played when we got into the hobby. And I was so excited about it when we first played it. And I'm still really excited every time it gets brought to the table. Dan from our Time Stories group is a big fan of this game as well. And every time he's got his copy that has a couple of the expansions in it, he's like, hey, you guys want to play this? I'm like, oh, yes, we're going to be able to play this. It's going to be a super fun time. And the fact that I'm still so excited about it means it should be on this list. Number 9, Race for the Galaxy.
Well, Danielle, how many of my top 10 games do you think are space games?
Oh, you even told me, and I don't remember. I want to say 4.
Okay. I didn't tell you specifically.
That's right. I said I was at more than half.
Yeah, so
I want to say 4.
Okay, well, count this one in, because my number 9 is Star Trek Ascendancy. Yes, it cracked my top 10 on 2 plays. This is a 2016 release from Gale Force 9, 3 to 5 players, 180 minutes, designed by Sean Swigart. Arundel and John Kovaleski. Art by Katie Dillon and Charles Woods on this as well. This is everything I want about Star Trek. See, a lot of people say, oh, well, we got the Star Trek game, we got Star Trek Panic, or we've got Star Trek 5-Year Mission, all these things about, oh, you know,
why do you have that game?
No, but, you know, you're doing bridge crew stuff, or you're being attacked, and you got to defend your ship, but that's not what Star Trek is about to me. Star Trek, to me, is about not the politics, but the interpersonal relationships and the political relationships of life in space. Star Trek has always been a series and a world about that. It's about something grand. It's about what we can apply to our own socioeconomic stuff and all that stuff we deal with. And Star Trek Ascendancy is the most macro game that I can think of in the Star Trek universe. You each take your different factions. You know, maybe I'll be Federation, you'll be the Romulans, Daniel will be the Klingons. And we are going to have all of the uncertainty of expanding out and getting into each other's territory and maneuvering ships and fleets and not really knowing what each other are doing. But at the same time, you're discovering, you're learning all these new planets, you're getting these new powers, you're developing technology. It is a 4X game, and I'm sure there are better 4X games out there to people who are just whatever about 4X, but I am a huge Star Trek fan, and there's no game that's made me feel more like the second half of Deep Space Nine than Star Trek Ascendancy. I think a lot of it is also coming down to the way that the board builds out. You don't have that static fixed board. The way that you build out the galaxy in Ascendancy blows my mind. I love it. It's as free form as space should be. And I love the fact that Gale Force 9 is continuing to support this game. We've had 4 expansions already with more on the way. No, 2 expansions plus the Borg with more expansions on the way. We have the Vulcan High Command coming. We have the Andorians coming. I would not be surprised if we see a Dominion big box like the Borg expansion at some point. The only real struggle about Star Trek Ascendancy to me is that I have to remember how to play it every time, and it does take a bunch. Is this your day? I mean, this is going to be, if you really want to do it, a 5 to 6 hour game if you're playing 4 or 5 players, which honestly is what I want to get into. It's so big, it's so epic, it is the grandiose feel of, 40 years of Trek plus? There's so much Star Trek to pull from, and my hope is that Star Trek Ascendancy continues to pull from that as time goes on. So yeah, my number 9, Star Trek Ascendancy. Moving on to number 8, and you may have seen that my hand has drifted toward the control panel because it is time to go into the Carcassonne in this particular top 10. Was that dang because of the reverb or because you didn't expect it to be number 8?
I didn't expect to be here in the Carcassonne.
Well, here we are because I have my number 8 game as Carcassonne, the City.
Okay.
This is the 2004 release, Hans im Glück, obviously, Klaus-Jürgen Werder, game that we played for the first time at Geekway last year that spawned the entire Carcassonne segment that we've been doing since roughly this time last year.
And we're going to keep it going a little longer than we anticipated because you just got another Carcassonne from Bert.
Lots of Carcassones in the world, yeah. Thank you, Bert, for giving us Carcassonne for 2, which we now have to also add to the end of the Carcassonne. But yeah, Carcassonne the City is the Carcassonne that I wish everybody could play. And if you go to a good convention like Geekway, they might have a copy in the library that you get a chance to. But it takes your standard tile placement and feature meepling and collecting points like that and adds in the wall. And it adds in this really exciting and unexpected timer into a game of Carcassonne. Carcassonne is the kind of game that, realistically, if you put too much in it, it can go way too long. And I will be the first to admit that you should never play with all the expansions, no matter how cool of an idea that seems once. Don't ever do that. That was a 3.5 hour experience, wasn't it?
With 4 people, yeah, that was a while.
But Carcassonne the City is tight, it is controlled, and the way that the wall builds out, and also additionally with the wall building out, you have a new opportunity to score as that wall builds out. You can place your guards up on the wall and worry about the horizontal and vertical rows of it. There's so many layers of strategy in the city. There's so much interesting decisions as to where and when you're going to close out a feature because you don't know if you want to close that wall another space at this point. I don't understand why this has not come back into print, other than people aren't requesting it enough because Carcassonne is not as exciting as some of the new hotness. And I'll be fair, this is the only game that's really not Cult of the New on my top 10 list. It's 2004. Everything else is a lot more recent, but that's just how gaming is, and that's kind of how I am as a person. So the fact that Carcassonne the City, a 15-year-old game, is on my top 10 means that if you need to play Carcassonne, come find me anytime, and I will take you to the city.
That's a weird thing to say, man.
I don't know, but it sounded cool, and I wanted to wrap up with a cool soundbite.
I like it.
Carcassonne the City is my number 8.
All right, my number 8 is Citrus, and I will put all of the designers and artists in the show notes when I do them because I am working off a photo on my cell phone. Citrus is a game about building out citrus orchards, and you start with this really, really bland-looking beige board that has nothing on it except these tokens where houses will be eventually. And you just pull these tiles of 5 different kinds of citrus orchards. You make interesting decisions about which groups of tiles you're going to take, knowing that if you take too many different types of orchards, you're going to spread yourself too thin, you won't be able to get any money, and you won't be able to place additional tiles in places that you really need them to get points. But at the same time, you don't want to place too few of your workers out, because then you won't have any way to get those points when you need to get them. You are strategically placing these orchards so that they block off other players and so that you can hopefully connect to a number of different point scoring opportunities as you go. It is the kind of game that every time we play it, somebody sits there at one moment and they're looking at their options to draw and they're like, I just want to take that one tile. But if I don't cash out for money now, I'm not going to be able to do anything for the rest of like this particular scoring. Mm-hmm. And it's a very simple game to teach, but it leads you to really interesting decisions. And I love the fact that as you play it, not only do you see your points going up, but you see this board becoming so beautiful with all these brightly colored citrus orchards around. It's just a fun game. There's a lot of give and take to the way that the placement and the scoring works. And it's a game that I routinely tell you to throw in our convention bag because I want to share it with more people. Mm-hmm. So that is Citrus, which was originally from DLP. I think it's from TMG now.
Yep.
So my 8th favorite game is Citrus. My 7th favorite game is a lot more of a party game. And I've been having card games, and, Citrus is sort of a Euro-y game. But you knew there was going to be at least one party game on this list, because sometimes you got to have fun.
Yeah.
My 7th favorite game is Codenames.
Oh, okay.
I absolutely love base Codenames. And I feel like in the years since base Codenames came out, a lot of the other versions of Codenames have sort of been talked about. I mean, we talked about Pictures ever so briefly. We talked about Duet a lot more than we talked about Pictures. But I absolutely love Codenames because of the way it feels to play it. Like, it's not a super complicated game, and obviously nobody's going to be like, I love Codenames because it is, this really in-depth mechanism. It's not. It's a fairly simple mechanism. But the feeling that you have when you've given somebody the clue and the number to get them to indicate which of the cards on that grid you are trying to get them to guess is just this tension that I very rarely feel in a game, because you are hoping that people who are on your team are reading your mind. And you have this sort of camaraderie, if you're giving the clues, with the other person who's giving the clues, who can see what you were working with and probably can see what the heck you were trying to get at. And you're both just sitting there trying to stay stone-faced while the guessers on the other side of the table are taking walks through completely different regions of thought than you were even remotely in. And that feeling is so amazing, but also being a guesser, trying to weave together from almost nothing this fabric of what this person could be thinking and watching out for the pitfalls that may be on that board. It feels like you are on a team with someone. And as a party game, I love party games that make you feel like you are on a team with the other people you're playing with. That is what gives me a good party game feel. It's why I love Monikers, which is, let me spoil this, not going to be on this list. It's the same camaraderie, and I absolutely love that. I get that every time I play Codenames. It's also great because you can jump in and out of it. It is a great game to set up in a group where everybody's not sitting down and we're going to play a game now. It's just like, oh, that's a game that's going on in a corner, which is great for a party. Number 7, Codenames for me.
My number 7 kind of harkens back to your number 10, and that is a small card game about trading. And Danielle goes, Yes, my number 7, Matryoshka. This is a 2016 release from White Goblin Games that is coming to Kickstarter, believe it or not, this Wednesday from Letterman Games. Yeah, it got picked up by Letterman Games, is going to be reprinting it with some new art tweaks.
Oh, that's right.
Thumbs up on that. This is a game that plays 3 to 5 players in 20 minutes, designed by Sergio Halaban with original art and some of the current art by Eduardo Berra. Matryoshka, for me, gives me the exact same feelings that you described when you were talking about Bonanza. This is a game about trading. It's about kind of trying to coerce people into giving you what you exactly want. The thing that I love about Matryoshka is that you have this kind of imperfect information about what all the other players at the table have, and I feel like literally every trading round of the game, where you slide your card to the person who's picking, you know exactly what they need, and you probably know that they're giving you the exact thing you need, and then they slide your card back to you, or something else happens at the table, and every single turn of Matryoshka, somebody's like, wait, what? How did it shake out that way? And I've had so much fun playing this at every player count that it's one of those games that I never expected to be right in my alley, because I'm not huge on, like, political trading or, whatever, manipulating and all that social stuff. But this one, the level of knowledge you have and the way that trading is handled kind of in secret allows you to have a lot of fun with it and a lot of really interesting choices as to how you want to try to get that card you really need. You're waiting on that 1/3 of Peanut Girl to fill out. You've got the other 6 and nobody knows you have the 5, 6, and 7. And then they don't take your trade for like 6 rounds. And you're just like, I don't know what's going on. Do I need to abandon this particular type of card? Probably. And then somebody across the table has 2 full sets of 7 and you don't know what the heck you did because you thought you had those cards, but I guess you put them away. Matryoshka, I'm super hoping gets a lot of attention this year, especially with this Kickstarter launching this Wednesday as of time of release. I highly encourage everybody to go check it out. I'm going to probably try to get a copy of the new edition because the art's going to be updated to help with colorblindness a little bit.
Which is weird because the original artwork also had a bunch of things that were meant to help with colorblindness. Technically, all the suits are different and they all had a different color in the ring surrounding the number.
Yeah.
But for all their efforts, it didn't work.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to help you with colorblindness, but I'm going to make you work for it.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see this new edition of it. They're not changing anything else about the rules. It's just going to be the same awesome gameplay, 3 to 5 players. Matryoshka, my number 7.
I do love that the surprises in that game are more often than not when somebody takes your card, when you pass them something that you think there's no way they're going to, like, they don't need anything of this color or this number. Like, I'm going to get this back, no problem, which is great because I didn't really want to give it to them, but it was what I thought was the worst card for them. And then they take it and you're like, well, I don't know anything about my life anymore.
Every single turn, something weird like that. And that's Matryoshka, my number 7. Moving on to number 6, and this is the newest of hotness on my entire list.
Really?
Yes. Number 6 is my game of the year last year, Escape Tales: The Awakening.
Okay.
This came out late last year from Board and Dice. Plays 1 to quote-unquote 4 players, but I suggest 2, maybe 3. Plays in 180 to 300 minutes. That's totally fine. You're going to enjoy all those hours. Designed by Jakub Kaban, Matt Dembeck, and Bartosz Idzikowski. Art on this one is by Magdalena Klepacz and Paweł Niziolik. So we talked about it earlier.
Wait.
Yeah?
You said this is your number 6,
This
yes?
is my number 6.
Oh. Well, that's convenient.
Tell me why.
Because this is also my number 6. Why don't we just both talk about it?
A rare moment of continuity on this particular top 10 list. So, yeah, Escape Tales, we talked about it at the beginning of the year when we got a chance to really finish that out. It has a way of subverting your expectations of how the escape room in a game system can work, in that it brings in a lot of extra ideas and puzzles without it being about fourth wall breaking. Frankly, I think that's kind of why it succeeds a lot compared to your unlocks, your exits, and stuff like that. That have always had really good puzzles. I've enjoyed them a lot, but Escape Tales engrossed me in the story, engrossed me in the theme, without constantly breaking me out or having a huge jarring moment why something didn't work in a certain way.
See, I feel almost, not the opposite, but I feel slightly differently about that. I feel like the puzzles in Escape Tales were so strong that I really didn't care what else it did. It gave me amazing puzzles, and there is another game that we may or may not end up talking about later down this list that started with some really, really great puzzles and didn't necessarily finish delivering all of them all of the time. But we got Escape Tales, and it was just puzzle after puzzle after puzzle, and they were so good that even if I wasn't super engrossed in the story, because the story was a little janky in Escape Tales,
heavy, yeah.
I wanted to get to that next puzzle because I knew it was going to be something I could sink my teeth into and just solve in a way that makes my brain feel good.
I think that there is a lot of strength in the system of Escape Tales as well. It's enhanced by an app, but the app is just there to give you the answers to the puzzle rather than being some really major piece of it. You're not using the app to solve a puzzle, or you're not, doing stuff like how Unlock works with its app where it's playing back audio files, stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's
just
really
gives you,
it's just there as a fact checker.
Yeah, and you give it the answer, and it tells you what to discard, essentially, if you got it correct.
And another thing I really appreciate about Escape Tales is there's no timing, there's no score, it's just about the outcome you get. And I'm hoping that this continues to be a strength of the Escape Tales system with multiple outcomes and different paths through, meaning you can actually replay this one, which is something that has rarely been done for any kind of escape room or solve your way out of this game kind of game.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would necessarily play it through again. It is possible, but you definitely have to wait long enough that you forgot puzzles, because in multiple runs you will experience most of the same puzzles. That being said, we played it through 6 months ago, and if you showed me those puzzles again, with the exception of one specific puzzle that had extenuating circumstances for why I remember how it works, I probably couldn't solve any of those puzzles without having to figure them out again at this point.
I am never going to forget that one puzzle in particular that was the end of our first session.
Yeah, that is the one I remember as well.
Blew my mind.
But
just fantastic design.
That also blew our minds because it was where we took a break.
Yeah. Well, we probably had to take a break at that point. And that's another thing I really appreciated about Escape Tales. It was really easy to save and stop in the middle of it, which for a, 4 to 6 hour escape room puzzle game is pretty going to be necessary. You got to have that point to break. And it was really easy to pack up and pull back out and pretty much know exactly what we were doing.
Yeah, it came with a really nice spreadsheet that you wrote down what you had and what location you were in and what of the tokens you had spent, and everything you would need to check to pull everything back out had a place to store it. I'm really excited to see how the next installment of the Escape Tales series ends up working out. I hope it's as good.
Yeah, apparently Low Memory is coming later this year.
I also hope that it's a little bit more friendly for other groups of folks who maybe didn't want the theme of the original. Which is sort of the thing that's part of what made me feel weird about putting it as number 6 on my top 10 list. There are definitely going to be people for whom this is a no-go, will not touch game.
Yes.
And I guess because it's my list, I'm like, okay, I can put it on there. But if you're taking this as a recommendation, look into the theme before you purchase this game. And if you're fine with it, go purchase this game.
Yeah, and if you want to reach out to us on social media, I'm more than willing to discuss and, give you what kind of info is in there. So, yeah.
Escape Tales, The Awakening. That is both of our number 6. My number 5, we talked about somewhat recently, but not the base game. We talked about the expansion.
Okay.
My number 5 is Altiplano.
Oh, okay.
Which is, I think that also was originally a DLP game, wasn't it?
Yes, it did come from DLP.
Do love games that were originally DLP games. And now that is out from Renegade Games. So you have the base game and you have a large box expansion that are out now. And in this game, it is just resource management. You're moving around on a circle of locations, but all of the locations are really always kind of available to you, so you're not really working on building a path, but you are just
carts.
Yeah, you are trying to take the resources that you are able to generate and turn them into the resources that you want to have in order to fulfill contracts and to build boats and to build houses and to put in your warehouse, and it is just a really good resource game. And it's kind of fun. It's got this fun alpaca theme that it's got to it. I really enjoy this game, and when we first got it, it came out an absolute ton in our game group. And I had a great time then. And then it sort of got put away because we had other things that we had to get played. But when the expansion came out, I was like, oh God, I forgot how good this game is. And then we played the expansion, and I'm just as excited about it. It is a super fun game, and I would love to play it a ton. And I would definitely play it with that expansion now.
I am really glad that we got the expansion for this over here in the States so quickly so that we could add that in and kind of breathe some life back into it. I've really enjoyed playing Altiplano with that expansion, and even just straight up the base way. The game's going to be about the same level of complexity no matter what. I do like having that expansion in there so you can do that kind of resource trading, and it frees up a little bit of how you're going to be able to get the resources you need to really build your bag and your warehouse effectively. I love bag building. I think it's fun. The production's really good. I'm glad that they replaced the falling over alpaca with a punchboard alpaca that can be your first player marker that doesn't fall over. You can just rope them to your box if you need to.
Yeah. It's a weird statement.
But it's so colorful and fun and pretty that it never feels like the 2.5 hours that it always seems to go.
Yeah, that's the thing that always surprised me. When we went back and played it with the expansion, we both said, that felt like it went about as quickly. And then we looked at the clock and we're like, oh, that still was like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But it was 2.5 hours of fun, engaging play.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I'm glad that it sticks around in our catalog so we can bring it out from time to time.
That is Altiplano, my number 5.
My number 5 is something you mentioned briefly before, and oh boy, is it a heavy box. This is a game called Agra. It's a 2017 release from Quinted Games, plays 2 to 4 players, 90 to 100.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. It's a 4-hour game.
No. It's designed by Michael Keller with art by Michael Menzel, one of the most gorgeous giant boards that I have ever seen that is held back, admittedly, by some frustrating graphic design that makes it really hard to see action spaces. But when I want to play a heavy game, and I have some people that have played it around me, I'm going to play Agra. There is something about Agra that just gets right into my brain, and I start really I see the lines between everything, and I see where everything is
the lines.
going to
That's the
connect.
Problem.
No, in my brain, I'm seeing all the connections between all of the pieces, and I say, I need to move this person one space this way on my farmer track, because next turn I'm going to go here, and it's not going to matter yet, but then I'll be able to get over here to get these resources. I'm going to sleep that person there, get this meditation over here, and then I can transfer this, turn it into a cloth, get myself another turn, do all this stuff, and it's a rush. It is heavy. It's like 4.34 on BGG, which I think is honestly a little heavier than it really is. I think people are just kind of put off by how complex some of the really decision-making in Agra is. But I just freaking love it, man. It's so cool, and it looks great on the table. It's a table hog. It's way, way too extravagant. The giant Emperor board up there did not need to be as big as it is. The board doesn't need to be as massive as it is, and you don't have to have so much wood on all of your player boards, but you do, and it looks great, and it feels as heavy as it plays.
Yeah, this feels like an event when you set it up, and then you play a game that feels equally like an event. Like, it is such an involved game, and it has such a long playtime, and you are thinking about so many different things as you play it, that the fact that it feels grandiose when you set it up feels appropriate. Mm-hmm. I obviously like this game as well. I had mentioned it. It is number 14 on my list. So I am going to be right there to play it with you as long as we can set out, several hours.
I'm going to bring it to Geekway. So if anybody really wants to play Agra, I will play Agra with you at Geekway.
Let's not make the mistake of starting that heavy a game very late, though.
I mean, I'll end up winning because I know it pretty dang well. Like the back of whose hand is this? All right, Agra, my number 5. Moving right along to the number 4s, the rarefied air. Air so rare that it's not quite an atmosphere yet. Maybe it's Mars? Perhaps terraforming Mars? Yes, Terraforming Mars is my number 4 game on this particular list. The 2016 release from Stronghold and Fricks Games, 1 to 5 players, 120 minutes, Designed by Jacob Frixellis with art by Isaac Frixellis. Terraforming Mars, if you are listening to this board game podcast, that is not like the, world's most popular podcast in the, entire world of board game space. You know what Terraforming Mars is already. It's a big old honkin' card playing, engine building game that has a billion expansions, just raised $1.3 million on Kickstarter.
We talked about it at the beginning of the episode.
$1.3 million. That's insane for an expansion that's like $35. Good job, Terraforming Mars.
Well, yeah, but I have a feeling that a lot of those people who backed that were buying everything, including those double layer playmats and the other 4 expansions that come with it.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely were a chunk of people that got in on that, but the fact that they had 26,000 backers, and I remember when we looked at it last time, 70% of that was just the expansion because I already have everything. I love Terraforming Mars. It comes out continuously in our game groups. It's such a exhilarating play no matter what we play with, and one of my favorite things about Terraforming Mars is that they've continued to produce very good expansions for it, and I've been skeptical about pretty much every expansion. I don't love Venus. I love both the map boards. I really dig Prelude, and Colonies added some really smart stuff. That's why I actually am going to get Turmoil, and I'm excited about that because it's not political intrigue crap. It's actually just like another area control game you're playing with Terraforming Mars. So I want to see what that is. I'm super excited about whatever the 6th expansion is, even though it hasn't even been announced yet. I'm tentatively excited about Terraforming Mars Legacy being a thing, because that's allegedly that's going to be a thing. BJ found out on Board Game Gumbo with Stephen Monacore a few
That's right.
Yeah. No, that's really happening.
Filed that in the things my brain would like to forget I found out.
But Terraforming Mars, production shortcomings not, included. In addition to, the components that people talk about, the art that people talk about, I feel like with all that, the game is still fantastic. I will at some point have a nice collector's box for all of this stuff. I'm not going to rebuy everything, but I'll probably put together like a crate or something. I'm sure Broken Token's going to do a crate once we're all said and done. And yeah, I want that because I want to take good care of this. I want to appreciate it, and I want to make taking it out feel like we're taking out one of the best games that I know. And Terraforming Mars, that's my number 4.
Cool. My number 4 is Sagrada from Floodgate Games. It is a game where you are trying to place dice into your stained glass window to build the stained glass window, where you can't place dice adjacent to dice of the same color or number. That is pretty much all of it. I mean, there are some tokens that allow you to subvert that a little bit, but most of the game is you are trying to make decisions about which dice that were pulled from the bag are the best for you to place in your window, leaving you the most options, but also providing you with the best bang for every space in your window's buck. And you are trying to work with the secret color that you have given at the beginning of the game to try to add that into your window, so that's another thing that you're trying to balance out. And it is another game, and this is sort of a theme with my list as I am looking back at it now. It is so simple to tell someone, okay, here's what we're doing. We're going to grab 10 dice, we're going to roll them, you're going to pick one, it's going to go around, it'll come back to you, pick another one. Can't be next to the same color, can't be next to the same number, let's go. And it is a fun game. Every time I play it, it is so brain-burny trying to figure out what will be available to you if you place a certain die in a certain space. Maybe if I put it in a different space, oh no, but then I can't put anything in this one space next to it because I've blocked it off because of color and number. It is amazing, and I love the thought puzzle of it. It is very well produced. Mm-hmm. It's got those very simple, bright, colorful D6s that look like pieces of stained glass. It's got the double-layer player boards that you slide your window card into and you place the dice in so they don't get bumped around. It is a great, fun game, and I love it, and I play it a ton, and I would love to keep playing it a ton.
Mm-hmm. I'm also very in love with Sagrada, and I am excited that there's more expansion content coming, so you get a little bit more tweaks here and there and have some more little fun stuff to play around with. It's a great, solid concept of a game, and I'm really hoping it continues to develop and has a really long life.
Yeah, I remember when we first saw this at Gen Con, I want to say 3 years ago, 2 years ago. We looked at it, and I was originally drawn to it because my parents had recently gone on vacation and seen the cathedral, which it is inspired by, the Sagrada Familia Cathedral. And I was like, oh, I've got to show that to my dad. Mm-hmm. And then I looked over at the game, and I was like, oh.
I need to show this to myself.
I need to keep this in mind for when it comes out, because it wasn't even out at that point. Mm-hmm. I was like, I need to keep an eye on that. And when it did come out, we bought it immediately. And it has been regularly in rotation at all of our game nights since then. Mm-hmm. I am super excited about this game. It is my number 4 favorite game of all time, Sagrada. My number 3 favorite game of all time is actually a game I had forgotten about how much I liked.
Oh, okay.
This was the sort of surprise dark horse for me, because I was making my list and I was going through all the games that I had ever played and just eliminating ones that I knew were going to be nowhere near my top 10. Because I wasn't going to run 600 and something games through Pub Meeple. I'd still be there doing it. And I was cutting stuff down, and I got to this game and I was like, that is a really good game. I should at least throw it in there. I mean, it probably won't make my top 10, but I'll at least throw it in. And then I remembered I had it on my cell phone. So on lunch at work, I pulled up the app on my phone and I played a game. And I played another game. And I played 2 more games, and it was time to go back to work, and I was like, damn, I kind of want to play another game. Mm-hmm. And I had forgotten how much fun this game is to play because of all the interesting choices and because of how much it is a give and take between the 2 players that play Patchwork. In Patchwork, you are making a quilt, and you are taking tiles from a ring which everybody sees at the beginning of the game, and you are placing them onto your board. You can't overlap, obviously. You're just filling in your larger square. You are trying to take pieces that fit well onto your board, but also give you buttons, which are the currency of the game. You need to spend the buttons to take pieces. But really the push and pull of it is what piece you're going to take from that ring and what it opens up to the other player. Because as you take pieces, the pawn of selection will move forward, and the next player, the other player that you're playing with, will get to choose from the 3 after that. And sometimes you really have to choose between what is the best tile for you to take and taking a slightly less good tile that's going to leave your opponent worse options for them. And if you don't do that, you are going to lose this game 100% of the time. I love this game. I love playing it in person, but I also love the app implementation. Digidice did an amazing job, and I know when that app came out, we played it hundreds of games with people all across the world. I know we both did. Mm-hmm. And it is just such a good game. It's the kind of game that you can play with another person and really feel like you are playing that game together. It's never a multiplayer solitaire feel, even though you're building something that the other person has zero control over. The game itself's system gives you so much interaction in just the availability you're giving them in such a simple way that I love that game and I want to come back and play it again every time I play it.
Patchwork is awesome. You're 100% right. And that app does make it really, really easy to get games in constantly. It's something that I have always kept in our game night bags for our game nights, either Good Road or Salute, because if I do ever have 2 people that come up and they want to be like, hey, we want to learn about board games, I'm like, okay, cool, let's quilt. And of course, one of them is always like, oh man, I don't want to quilt. I'm like, yeah, you do. You will by the end of this. And it's one of those things that you sit down, you explain the very simple rules. You got 2 different kinds of currency you got to deal with. Here's how it's going to go. I'm going to watch you play 2 turns and we're going to roll on from there. And everybody wants to play another game, or they're like, oh wow, that was really good. How can I get that? Or where can I find games like this? And I think that really speaks to the power of Patchwork. It's a unique theme, it's fun, it's colorful with a really awesome strategy to it. So yeah, I'm right there with you on that.
Well, that is why it is my number 3, Patchwork.
My number 3 is a game that we have talked about a good bit. It's a big box. It's got a lot of pieces in it, and it's doesn't hit the table as much as I want it to. But my number 3 is Scythe.
Really?
Yes. My number 3 is Scythe, the 2016 release from Stonemaier Games. 1 to 5 players, 115 minutes. I guess you can play 7 if you really want to with the expansion
You're
stuff.
not supposed to.
You're not supposed to. Designer Jamie Stegmaier said that you're not supposed to play with 7, but if you really want to,
we definitely did a couple times, though.
Art on this is Jakub Wrzalski, and Scythe is, like my previous comment here, Terraforming Mars, you probably know about Scythe if you're listening to this podcast. Big honkin' game.
We also just talked about My Little Size.
We did just talk
about
what
it is.
It's going to be really confusing if you didn't know. Yeah, you got your big old board on the table. You're maneuvering your units around the board to gather resources, to upgrade your abilities, and create structures, and get to the factory, and do all this other cool stuff. And Scythe is one of the games that I will never turn down. And it's frustrating how rarely I get to take it places. And I think, honestly, a lot of that is because I have a very upgraded edition of Scythe, and it's in the big legendary box, and it's kind of a chore to bring it around places.
We also need to spray varnish your minis.
We do need to finish the minis, yes. Thank you so much, Morgan, for painting those, because they look really awesome. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it's the kind of game that I want to have painted minis for, and I'm not a painted minis kind of person. We don't, historically don't talk about miniatures games very often, because they're not super exciting, and honestly, they're never worth the investment into them, in my personal opinion. I love Scythe. I will continue to invest more money and more time into Scythe because every time I play this, I'm having an awesome time. I get rewarding experiences out of it. There's always some fun interaction or some crazy encounter card comes up that makes the story something to tell. Another really big awesome kudos to Jamie Stegmaier for putting the accomplishments sheet in there so that you do have something to look back onto, because this is a game that you're going to want to remember those stories. That's why we still have Daniel's very colorful nickname on the particular achievement sheet, because he ended the very first game of Scythe that we were all having a whole lot of fun about. Daniel, thank you for doing that. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to continue to play Scythe. Hopefully I can play it more and more as time goes on.
When you were describing, it's a big box and I don't get to play it a ton, I was like, is this going to be Scythe? But I'm honestly surprised that it's this high for you. This is definitely something that we should get to the table more. And we have the entire campaign that we haven't even started because we've got, like you said, we have to finish up some stuff we have going on for campaign games, and you don't want to have 15 campaign games open, then none of them will ever get played.
Yes.
But I am excited to play the Rise of Fenris campaign for this.
Agreed. Scythe, my number 3. All right, moving on to my number 2. Which one do you think it is? Because I bet you have a good idea of what 2 games I have left.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I suspect that your number 1 game has not changed.
Okay. So, rolling on, my number 2 game of all time is Among the Stars.
I'm wrong.
Yes, you are. 2014 release from Artipia and Stronghold Games, 2 to 4, but really 6 if you want to, or 8 if you have enough stuff. Players, 30 to 45 minutes, depending again how much stuff you have. Designed by Vangelis Bagiartakis with art by Antonios Papantonio and Odysseus Stamaglou.
You've said those names a couple times,
I have said those names a few times. Among the Stars is it was my favorite game for a very long time, and realistically, it's going to be a game that will continue to be one of the games that I always want to go to. It's not Scythe levels of, grandiosity. It's not terraforming levels of complexity, but it is a simple card game where you are drafting, which I love. You are placing cards in front of you to build a unique space station that will always build differently, that has really interesting rules for adjacency and a whole bunch of crazy stuff that can happen depending on the cards you choose to put in. And it's got space. I ain't gonna lie, I like space a lot, and they did a good space theme on this one. I like the world that Among the Stars takes place in. They've got some interesting races that all have different powers and stuff like that, and I love Among the Stars. It's also on the list of games that are a pain in the butt to set up because there is so much content and you do need to build a specific deck of cards to play Among the Stars, especially once you've bought everything, which is what I have.
That sounds like you made that problem for yourself, my dude.
I did, but at the same time I did it because I love opening up that box of cards and looking at it and like, oh, I wonder what this one would do with some other stuff. There's so many synergies and interesting things that can combine in weird ways to make the game really interesting. And if you've never gotten into Among the Stars, I would say go buy the base box because the base box is as solid as you want it to be. And the Among the Stars Revival, the 2-player one that adds in the little spaceships that kind of go around and crowd stuff, I love that too. And I think that's a really good way to get in if you're always going to play with 2 players.
But does not mesh with the original game. You either buy the regular one or Revival, right?
You could put the Revival stuff in. I haven't done it yet, but you totally could. There's enough spaceships to do it. Oh. And you can use the kind of in-between people in that expansion in that as well. And honestly, I kind of want to do some of that now. We'll find a way. We'll find a way to make it happen. Maybe I'll bring those boxes to Geekway on the off chance that somebody wants to play Among the Stars with me at Geekway.
I don't know if the tables there are big enough.
We'll get some of the round ones near the back.
Fair enough.
But yeah, that's my number 2. It's Among the Stars. Danielle?
All right. My number 2, I actually struggled with a little bit because it is a game that I am currently having mixed feelings about. But when I thought about the experience of playing this game over the literal years that we have played this game, it is impossible to deny that this game has brought me probably the most amazing joy of any game that I've ever played. It is not my favorite game, but it does at least deserve to be my second favorite game, and that is Time Stories. Punchboard Media just recently put out a cooperative list and requested a blurb about Time Stories, and I told the story there, so if you've read it before, I apologize. But it's my story, and I'll tell it on our podcast.
You are allowed to tell it. Here it is.
When we first played Time Stories, I was so excited. The next morning, I woke up, and I called my dad, with whom I had played Myst when I was about 13 years old. And I remember sitting there for months and months, every night when my mom went to work the night shift. We would sit there and play Myst with our journal, trying to figure out all these puzzles for months. And I would be able way past my bedtime, but it was the fun of biting into those puzzles. And I woke up that morning and I called my dad, and I spent literally an hour and a half just telling him how excited I was that I found something that gave me that same feeling of puzzle discovery, that gave me that same feeling of trying to work my way through this world and figure out what exactly was going on, find the clues, put the right clues together, do it all in a way that made everything click together and solve this mystery, and it was amazing. I knew before I started that story that my dad was never going to play Time Stories. He doesn't have people to play it with. It's not how he would choose to spend his time now. But just the joy of telling him about that, and he was very excited to hear about it, that joy I am never not going to have had. Time Stories has brought me more moments of like, I'm sorry, what just happened? Than any other game I can think of ever will at any point throughout my playing. Now, there have also been moments of, I can't believe they just did that. Those beep, 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 etc. But to say that having those moments of frustration takes away from the absolute amazing, and there's no other word for it, but sheer joy that I had from the highs of Time Stories is, you can't say that. Now, I will say, not everybody should play every Time Stories scenario. There are definitely ones that you can skip. There are ones that are built out of the main story that is going on. And there are ones that I feel like don't necessarily deliver in the ways that they should have. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if you are a person who has that yearning for something that gave you that Myst-like experience, base box Time Stories is an amazing place to put your money. And if I could have that feeling again, I would do it over and over and over again. So Time Stories is my number 2 game of all time. So that leaves me with my number 1 game of all time, because I made sure that you were going to go last before we started this list. My number 1 game of all time is actually a game that we've already talked about.
Good,
and there was
a
reason I was particularly quiet on it, especially after you and I sitting here and I said, I want this to be a conversation. And then I said absolutely nothing when you were talking about how your number 4 game was Terraforming Mars.
No, okay.
Because Terraforming Mars is my favorite game of all time. For all the reasons that you talked about earlier, it is an amazing game. Now, we have a bit of different opinions on some of the expansions. I could take or leave the expansion boards. They're not very special to me. I like Venus a little bit more than you do. I agree with Prelude and Colonies both being very, very good expansions that should be added in. I am excited to see what Turmoil is, despite the fact that it adds politics, a thing I think needs to be added nowhere in the world right now. But every time we play it, there's a different game that comes out. Everybody chooses a different strategy. Even people who we joke about choosing the same strategy every time never play the same game because you don't get the same cards because people know that that's what you like to do, so they don't let you get the dogs card to put into your cities.
No pets for Daniel Brooks.
Indeed. But it is such a different game. I 100% recommend playing this game with drafting. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, you're never at the mercy of the deck of cards. You can choose what you have in your hand and what strategy you'd like to pursue. And there are so many strategies that you can pursue and see how you can make something that you've never tried before work. How you can make the cards that you can take out of this group. Because maybe even in drafting, what you start with in the drafting pool changes. So maybe I really love to have an asteroid at the beginning of the game that really jump starts my game with a big impact. But we didn't get any asteroids at the beginning of the game. Well, I'm going to have to do something else now, aren't I? Because I'm going to have to make this 2-hour game work. And I absolutely love finding out what the thing I'm going to do in this game is. There are things that you can lean into, like if you don't get any greenery in this game, you're probably not going to do well. There's your Terraforming Mars tip. If you get no greenery, it's going to be rough. But at the same time, what you do with that information is going to change the way your game plays. What corporation you have is going to change the way your game plays. And everything about this game is so variable from game to game that it takes the same strong system and gives you just a fount of variability within such a good game. I love it. I love playing it. Every time it comes out, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in. I'll elbow you out of your seat if you're taking that last seat, because I'm going to be in on this game. Terraforming Mars is my favorite.
All right, so here it is. We are at the top spot of my particular list, and I have the, I guess, joy of revealing my number 1 game of all time at this time.
You brought this on us.
I did bring this on us. I haven't had a chance to play this one in a long time. And as I was thinking about games, it came clear to me that my number 1 game of all time is one of the most fun experiences I've ever had in my life, and that is Monikers.
Huh! I did not expect your favorite game of all time to be a party game.
Monikers is fantastic. It's so much fun. We have such great time at the...
Agents, this is Bob. I don't know if you can hear me, but there's something really wrong with the timeline. I'm gonna come in and see if I can help this one out. All right, hold on.
Table getting together with Dan and Kyle to play each next scenario of Time Stories. So, like, it really shouldn't be a surprise that Time Stories is my number 1 game of all time.
Yeah, I was starting to get a little worried that you were going to not put it on your list for some reason.
No, and I will say, looking at my list, there's a lot of other games that honestly could have made it up to number 1. I really considered Among the Stars. I considered Scythe. I considered Terraforming Mars. All of those could have a shot at this. And I specifically picked Time Stories Lumen Fide for my number 1 game of all time. And the reason I'm picking that one particular scenario rather than Time Stories as a whole is that the way I felt at the end of Lumen Fide, one game-breaking typo aside, was the way that I hadn't felt ever in anything other than really Asylum when we played that first base box. And I guess you could, swap either of those two in. But Lumen Fide did everything I wanted, and then it gave me so much more. It gave me a really cool fourth wall breaking puzzle. It gave me some really interesting ways to manipulate the system to kind of maneuver around what cards were coming out, what rooms we were in, where we could go, and what we could do. And it worked so dang well. And then that ending, to finish it up with the three of you and know that we had secrets that we couldn't talk about with Team Beta, blew my mind. Because up until that point, every one of the spoiler episodes, we had always, gotten together, we talked about everything, but at Lumen Fide, and I honestly feel really bad for losing the spoiler episode now, because what we could have and would have done to make that spoiler episode make sense for those who didn't find our path, or those who didn't find their path, would have been really interesting. So I picked Lumen Fide because, for me, that's where you should probably stop Time Stories. After that, scenarios are pretty good, and honestly, you can play the other ones, and you will still get a lot out of them, but the feeling you get at the end of Lumen Fide that there is something magical and grandiose about to happen, they don't follow through on. And specifically when we talked about Brotherhood of the Coast a few episodes ago, they give you a very similar choice in Brotherhood of the Coast, which really kind of negated some of that about Lumen Fide. So I'm going to go back in my mind and say Time Stories, Lumen Fide, that's where this ends. And that makes Time Stories my number 1 game of all time. All right, well, there it is. We've thrown ourselves to the wolves. I have called Time Stories my favorite game of all time. The internet explodes in an uproar. Maybe. I don't know. Let us know your thoughts. Throw a thought in the guild or on the Slack channel. We'd love to hear it. Just would love to hear that y'all are listening and enjoying this episode 100 of Time Stories? No. This episode 100 of Draft Mechanic. But we've got more. We're going to go talk about some beer, and then we're going to close it out with that listener Q&A. For more information on anything we talk about in today's beer segment, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. So for today's beer segment, we are actually going to split it up a little bit. We have, instead of an on tap, I'm going to talk about a brewery. I'm going to put this particular brewery on tap because we didn't talk about one particular game and we already did Time Stories on tap once and so on and so forth. And Danielle is going to give us a significant beer primer as well.
Yeah.
I am super excited to hear about.
It is one I've been saving for a while for a special episode. Well, this is a very special episode of Draft Mechanic.
Yes. So when I went to the Gaming Hoopla up in Mundelein, Illinois, I got to drive from Chicago Midway up to Mundelein, and on the way I got to stop in Niles, Illinois, for a place that I had wanted to go for a very long time. It's the tap room of Hubbard's Cave and Année. They are actually the same brewery, they just do 2 different imprints, they all brew out of the same space, the system's not huge, but they're a brewery that I've been infatuated with for a very long time. I love their bottles, the Année imprint does amazing sours, Hubbard's Cave did some great stouts and some really good fresh IPAs, and I think when I talked about the Augusta, Georgia Beer Traveler a few episodes ago, I talked about how they got a whole bunch of Hubbard's and Année stuff. And
I vaguely remember that happening, yes.
Really impressed with all that stuff. I love this brewery. I've been following them for years, and finally I get to go there. So Hubbard's Cave and Année in Niles, Illinois are just straight up a tap room in a strip mall. It's very unassuming. In fact, it doesn't even say the name on the channel lettering above the brewery. It just says brewery. So you go there because you know the address and you know what you're looking for. They are open Thursday through Monday afternoons and longer hours on the weekend, obviously. But, Tuesday, Wednesday, no chance. So go Thursday through Monday, and you will have a chance at some of these beers. So when I went in, real small bar, maybe 15-seat bar. They have 1 or 2 tables floating around, some stuff like that. And I sat down, and I look at the menu, and it's maybe 24 taps of the best of the best. And I want to talk about a few of those.
Yeah, you sent me a picture of that tap list, and I was sitting at work, and I was like, this is not fair. This is mean. He sends this to me.
So I'll start with the Hubbard's Cave, the clean side of things. The fresh double IPA version 30 is the one that I started off with. This is a double IPA that clocks in at 8.5% ABV, and it's kind of their rotating hop experimental series. They do a lot of interesting hop combinations and additions and stuff like that. So this one is Chinook, Idaho 7, and Simcoe. I'm really big on Idaho 7 right now. It's got a real tropical and super fruity, citrusy kind of flavor to it and brings a lot of that excitement to it that I've originally got from Citra hops. This one was actually canned like 2 days before I was there. So it was like the freshest of fresh. And any of the fresh double IPA, V whatever, are super worth getting. And I know they actually redo batches from time to time as well. So if you see an old one on Untappd that you want to grab, you probably can get a shot at it. After that, I moved over to Année, but just to keep it pretty simple, I want to continue on with the clean stuff. I had a beer called El Zacaton, which is an imperial stout, 12% ABV, mole-inspired imperial stout fermented on toasted oak with cacao nibs, vanilla, cinnamon, almond flour, plus ancho, guajillo, and habanero chilies. I actually texted you at the moment, and I'm like, this replaces Abraxas entirely for me. Abraxas from Perennial in St. Louis, another very, very good chili stout. We have a bottle downstairs, Danielle. I'm not going to be called a liar on this one.
No,
El Zacaton is
I have
unbelievable.
A feeling that maybe it just lives next to Abraxas. We can have both.
Okay, fine. So, yeah, absolutely phenomenal. I hope they continue to produce this one in the future. And then the last one, I actually got some cans and took this to Gaming Hoopla, and I shared it with Mike and Brent from Elf Creek Games. It is chocolate and cinnamon pot de creme. It's an imperial stout, 11.5% ABV. Imperial stout with cocoa nibs, cinnamon, vanilla, and lactose. Just super thick. Tons of flavor, tons of that caramelly and lactosey flavor that you want from something that's called pot de creme. It really makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. Jumping over to the Année side of things, I tried 3 different beers of a particular series called Le Grand Monde, which is their brewery society that we talked about long, long ago. It's like $350 a year, and you get a whole bunch of bottles, specifically these Le Grand Monde bottles that are their fun experimental sours that do really interesting, crazy things.
So wait, you can get them even if you don't join the club?
Yeah, you can actually pick up some of the bottles and stuff there, but they are taproom only availability.
Oh, okay.
And I got them on draft as well. I brought a few bottles back because they're, well, as you're about to hear, significant beers. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to be a part of that brewery society, but as somebody who kind of occasionally goes up to Chicago, but not as regularly as I want to, I don't know if I could get up there enough to get the bottles.
Also $350.
For what is included in terms of number of bottles and also other stuff, it is well worth it if you're in the Chicagoland area and like sour and or strong beer. So I started off with, I asked the bartender, hey, what order should I drink these in? He says, go 2, 3, 1. So I did that. So 2019-2, these are all American Wild Ale, 7% ABV. That is the barrel-aged Oud Bruin style American Wild Ale with blackberries and raspberries. Really just strong fruit flavors, all the berries you could ever want, and just kind of that nice boozy undertone to that.
If I remember correctly, you sent a picture of this, and it looked like when you run a beet through a blender.
Mm-hmm. No, that one's yet to come.
Oh,
yes. Number 3, and this is a bottle that I brought back, and this is one we actually drank over the weekend. It is the barrel-aged American Wild Ale with cinnamon sticks, peaches, and vanilla beans. Contemplate that peach cobbler of a beer real quick, because that's kind of what it is. It's a peach cobbler with a big, boozy, farmhousey undertone to it.
Yeah, very sour, though.
Oh, my gosh.
So if you're expecting
amazing.
A sweet peach cobbler, this will not be that, but it was absolutely great.
Yes.
We split it 4 ways with our Time Stories group,
Yeah,
and
we were cutting it
everybody was just blown away by how good it was.
Dan needed to take a minute and just kind of contemplate what he was drinking. But I will say, those kind of were precursors to what I had, the 2019-1, which is the barrel-aged American Wild Ale with black currants and vanilla. Now, this, like you said, I sent you a picture of this, and it looked like beet beer. It was so thick and red. The color in this thing was amazing. The lacing so good. And it was strong, but not syrupy. It was never cloyingly sweet. It was very well balanced. The vanilla really fit well into this in a way that I wouldn't have expected. But it's one of the most exceptional beers I've ever had. One of the most exceptional sours. And just, wow. So that's my quick little rundown of Hubbard's Cave and Année. I know you can get their beer all around Chicago, and you can get their bottles, but I would encourage you to make a trip through that if you are going by. If you go to the Gaming Hoopla next year and you fly into Midway or drive through Chicagoland, take a detour through Niles on Friday and stop there and grab a few beers. Frankly, if I go back to the Hoopla, I'm going to fly into Midway. I'm going to stop at Année on the way there. So yeah. Go check it out. We'll put links in the show notes. Well, Danielle will put links in the show notes because she's amazing and puts links.
We're going to put that picture you sent me in the pictures on the show notes.
Very true.
Okay, so for the rest of our beer segment, the major chunk of our beer segment, if I do say so myself based on how many notes I've written, I have been sort of avoiding the idea of talking about Belgian Trappist beers for several beer segments at this point. Because there is so much to say about them, and because there is so much history, I wanted to save it for what was a very important episode, like I said earlier, and this is that episode. So buckle in, because we're going to talk about Trappist beers.
Woo!
Beer brewing in monasteries in Belgium actually goes back to the 6th century, and it was used to create clean, potable water that people could drink. Because if you've done any kind of study on water in the Middle Ages and before then, water had lots of little living things in it, which could make you very, very sick. So when you brew beer, it kills those little living things, and it makes it safer to drink. So people forever, I think in my farmhouse episode, that beer primer, I talked about how people would give their workers beer because it was a clean way to keep them, hydrated. Obviously very low alcohol beer. You're not talking about like a 9% beer or anything. But that's the last we're going to talk about beer as potable water. For a while, I just wanted to get that out of the way because we are going to start the history lesson portion of this beer segment.
I'm pulling up a desk.
Cool. The date is going to be 529 AD. And the news is the creation of the paternal rule of St. Benedict, which was created, by St. Benedict, and which detailed the expectations for monks and nuns. The bullet points on this rule are that they should have authentic poverty, there should be simplicity in the liturgy, manual work, non-involvement in secular affairs, much spiritual reflection and observance, along with a balance of work, reading, and study. Fast forward to the date, 1098 AD. The news now is that the Order of Cistercians of the Strict Observance is formed in Citro, France, by Saints Robert, Alberic, and Stephen. This is a return for the monks to the rule of St. Benedict, because they felt that they had strayed from the rule of St. Benedict. Fast forward again, now the date is 1659 AD. The news now is that the Cistercians in La Trappe, France, splinter off from the other Cistercians to return their order to a strict rule of St. Benedict, for realsies this time. All rule of St. Benedict, all the time. These folks are where we get the name Trappist from, because they were from La Trappe. Fast forward again. The date-ish now is the French Revolution. The news is that the Trappist monks were driven out of France, and when they resettled, it was largely in Belgium, which coincidentally wasn't Belgium at the time. It was part of the Netherlands, and Belgium wasn't Belgium until 1830, but the area that would become Belgium shortly. Trappist goods are produced in support of the operations of the monasteries and to finance their charitable endeavors. See the authentic poverty and manual work from the Rule of St. Benedict. Monks always put religion over the goods that they produce. This means that to fully commit to the Rule of St. Benedict, see spiritual reflection and observance, they often have to hire workers into their breweries who are just supervised by the monks. So they don't actually produce all of the beer, that's not required, but they do have to supervise anybody who is producing the beer. Fast forward again.
Whoosh.
This time the date is 1997, so you probably remember it. This time the news is that in order to keep everyone who was not a Trappist monk from calling their goods Trappist goods, 8 Trappist breweries got together and formed the International Trappist Association, which issues a seal that says authentic Trappist products for stuff that is made by its members. To be an International Trappist Association brewery, you have to follow 3 rules. The first is that the beer must be brewed within the walls of a Trappist monastery, either by the monks themselves or under their supervision. The second is that the brewery must be of secondary importance within the monastery, and it should witness to the business practices proper to a monastic way of life. And the third is that the brewery is not intended to be a profit-making venture. The income covers the living expenses of the monks and the maintenance of the buildings and the grounds. Whatever remains is donated to charity for social work and to help persons in need. So that really follows everything we've been talking about until this point. It should make sense if you've been paying attention to what I've been talking about.
I've been paying attention.
There are currently 14 abbeys in the ITA that can label their beers authentic Trappist beers. And honestly, one of them is in the United States at this point. I think in 2013 was the first one. It's in Massachusetts. That's a great history lesson and all, but I should probably tell you about the beers too, right? Cool. There are 4 main kinds, which have different names and numbers depending on which abbey you're looking at, but for simplicity we're going to call them singles, which are usually what's drank by the monks themselves, doubles, triples, and quads. A lot of the breweries will number them like 6, 8, 9, 6, 8, 9, and 12. The 12 I remember for sure. We'll get to that in a little bit. But they are singles, doubles, triples, and quads. These are all top fermented ales that are brewed with Belgian yeast, which is responsible for many of their distinct flavors. They are bottle conditioned, highly carbonated, and up until recently, they all would have been dark beers, except the single. The single is kind of like, here, drink this, you're a monk, have some monk beer. But doubles, triples, and quads, up until in the history scheme of things recently, all would have been dark beers. Let's start with the weakest. The Belgian single is a medium light-bodied pale ale. This has malt up front and fruity spiciness from the yeast, but it's also hoppy and bitter on the finish. It should be in the 4.5 to 6% ABV range. Like I said, you don't want your people who are supposed to be doing important things drinking really high alcohol beers. And it is often not sold, it's only for the consumption of the monks who are at the abbey. The first one that you're going to see regularly sold is the double. This is a deep brown or red color with dark fruit aromas and flavors. It should have only mild hop bitterness and very little hop flavor. It can have some alcohol flavor, but the finish should not be much. It should have a spiciness from the yeast, and it should be malt forward. It can have some caramel flavors from the crystal malt or the dark candy sugar that is used in the brewing. We're going to actually skip triples for a minute, and we're going to go straight to quads.
Bye.
I promise we'll come back.
Yay.
Quadruples are sometimes called Belgian strong dark ales. This is the case in the Beer Judge Certification Program guidelines, which are the guidelines you'll very often see me using for telling you about all the smells and tastes that you should have in your beer. But they are definitely brewed in Trappist breweries. Quads are, that is. So I'm going to talk about them. In a lot of ways, they are just stronger versions of doubles. The double, triple, and quad would have originally referred to the original gravity of the beer, with a single having an original gravity of 1.03, a double roughly up to 1.06, a triple roughly up to 1.09, and quads 1.12. So when I was saying, you'd have a double maybe being called a 6, because that was the OG, the original gravity of the beer after that 1.0. I said I would always remember 12 because one of the more famous quads, and certainly one of the more sought-after quads, is Westvleteren 12, or Westie 12 if you like to search out this type of thing. And it is a quadruple, and it has that original gravity range. Quads are deep amber or dark copper in color and have flavors and scents of raisin, fig, date, cherry, and plum, so dried, rich fruits. They have a strong malty sweetness and a noticeable alcohol presence, which makes sense because they can be up to 12% alcohol. They should have a creamy off-white head, and if you'd really like to draw a line between Trappist quads and generic Belgian strong dark ales, the BJCP says that Trappist quads should be slightly drier, but not enough different that they made a different category. They're just like, if you really need to know, Trappist quads are probably slightly drier than Belgian strong dark ales, but it's the same category. Okay, let's go back to triples, which up until the 1930s were distinguished from doubles and quads by that original gravity thing that I just talked about a minute ago. In the 1930s, Hendrik Verlinden of the Dry Linden Brewery, who was not a monk, but had totally done some contract work with the Westmalle Trappist Brewery in the 1920s, started trying to make a golden ale to compete with the rise in popularity of lighter-colored beers in the rest of Europe. He released Cleopatra as a Trappist-style beer. Potter beer is often what they would refer to as the single, so Potter associated the beer with monks. So he released Cleopatra, which is now called Vidcap Triple, because I said he's not a monk. Whether or not he helped to develop the idea when he was working with the Westmalle monks, Westmalle released their own version of a golden triple in 1934, and that is now what we look to as the recipe, essentially, for a triple. They tinkered with this a little bit, but it hasn't changed since 1956, so they got a pretty good thing going. A triple should be golden yellow in color, with a lacy white head. It should have strong notes of pepper and clove, as well as citrus fruits and banana, or if you're me, mostly it just smells like banana. The spiciness definitely highlights the yeast, and there should be a low bitterness and a moderately dry to dry finish. There's enough alcohol noticeable that it should balance out the malt. So that one is very different from the double and the quad at this point, but like I said, that is only a recent discovery. So if you are headed to Belgium, if you're headed to Belgium, I am jealous of you. If you're not headed to Belgium and you are looking in the Belgian beer section of your local bottle shop, that's what you should be expecting when you're looking at these bottles. And if you want an authentic beer, look for that authentic Trappist product seal that's going to be on the bottle, and have it be from one of the 14 places that can call themselves Trappists.
Well, I have learned a significant amount of things about Trappist beer right now.
Cool. That was the point.
Coincidentally, it's time for our listeners to learn a few more things about us in this Listener Q&A to round off episode 100.
I'm not Trappist.
Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com.
Okay, episode 100, let's round it out with a listener Q&A. We did this back in episode 50. Maybe we'll do it again in episode 150. Who knows?
That would be how precedent works.
Precedent being set. All right, so first up... Oh, by the way, we asked for questions on Twitter, Board Game Geek, and also on our Draft Mechanic Slack channel. If you want to jump in on the Slack channel and chat with us about board games, beer, and puns that me and or Patrick have made at some point, you can go on there. It's draftmechanic.net/Slack. It's free to join, jump in there, and talk about all those things. All right, so let's start off with stuff from BGG. First question I got from Phil Hendrickson. Even though you were married, what is the most interesting or fun thing you have learned about each other through doing the podcast?
Okay.
So what do you got?
I have learned about your learning curve, which I did not know about because when I first met you, way back, you knew all this cool stuff that I had no idea about. And I was like, okay, this guy just knows stuff. But having done this podcast and having to play so many different games, I have learned that you have a learning curve of about 3 instances.
Okay.
If we play a new game, I can beat you the first time. I would almost bet I can beat you the first time, unless there's farming involved. I don't know who will win the second game, but I've got a chance.
Yeah.
By game 3, I am done. I will never win that game ever again unless you're drunk or very sick.
You continue to say this. I don't think that's empirically true.
It is largely true. Like, if we could plot every time it went, Danielle wins by a bunch, the game is close, Jake wins by a bunch forever, that would be more than 75% of the games we play. So I've learned that you do not actually just know everything, you just have an incredibly quick learning curve.
Okay.
And that it's dangerous in board games.
All right. I do not win nearly as much as people think that I win. Tamara wins all the time.
Well, yeah, we all
She's
know
dangerous.
Tamara wins all the time, but you don't play games with Tamara all the time.
That's true. Okay, thing that I have learned about Danielle. I would say I didn't realize how deep you went in puzzles.
Love
like,
puzzles.
I knew you liked puzzles. I knew you liked things. You know, obviously you kind of brought us into gaming as a whole. But, like, as we've played more and more games, I've really started to understand that, like, you love to pick apart puzzles a ton. And it applies in everything. And we've learned, obviously, like, you used to stay up late with your dad playing Myst. You know, stuff like that. Like, this has been a part of your life forever. And I'm always surprised when we pick up on a game. I'm like, oh, this is, you know, really dry and formulaic or whatever. And you're like, oh, I really like this. There's pieces that I can work around and move around in here. Like when we were playing Crystallo earlier, I didn't even think that you would want to have a shot at that game. But you're just like, no, this is a puzzle that I can play with myself and not have to worry about you getting in the way of my puzzle.
Those were my exact words. I was like, stay out of my puzzle.
That makes a lot of sense. So that's something that's been really interesting. And I'm glad that games have shown me that. So moving on, from Jen B. What game surprised you the most that you have played since episode 50? And similarly, what game has disappointed you the most? I'll lead off on this one. The game that surprised me the most since we played, that we played since episode 50, I talked about in my top 10, it's Matryoshka. I did not expect to like that game that much. I figured like, oh, I'll play this game and I'll just be like, okay, cool, card game, moving some cards around. Honestly, like, to go back to the conversation, I didn't expect it to be more exciting to me than Bonanza, because Bonanza kind of did those things, but then Matryoshka did it in a way that I'm like, oh yeah, let's do that. Let's only ever do that ever again. Biggest disappointment, Seafall. It seemed like it would be so good, and it wasn't. It just, we never got through, like, I don't think we got more than 3 games in before just like, no, this is a game that doesn't do anything, and it's sad because it seemed like it was going to do everything. But then they took it all out.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess my biggest surprise would have to be Quacks of Quedlinburg, because it just sounds like not fun. And I had not really heard of it much before it was nominated for the Kennerspiel, I think it was. And then we got into it, and it was super fun. It was actually, before I reorganized, it was on my top 10 list. And I looked at it, and I was like, I don't necessarily know if it should be quite that high. But it is a very, very, very good game, and I enjoy it quite a bit. It's come out a lot with our group, but I didn't really expect anything from it until we were put on to the idea by North Star when they were bringing it to the US.
Cool.
My biggest disappointment is probably still going to be my biggest disappointment from 2017, which is Photosynthesis.
Oh, yeah.
Because that game looked so pretty and should have been so good.
No.
And it was, I won't say hot garbage, but I will say that I won't say hot garbage.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that Bosk is coming along, and it's going to give me a nice, pretty tree game that I don't hate.
Better trees. Moving on, Aaron Cassidy from Boards Alive. If you're not already listening to the Boards Alive gaming podcast,
What are you doing with your life?
Yeah, I don't know. Go after this episode, go to listen to Boards Alive. They should have one out today. I think we're on the same schedule right now. Aaron wants to know, what is the most uniquely themed game you have ever played? And also, what theme would you love to see incorporated in a game design? You got anything?
I mean, I feel like Ice Cool has to be on the top of, like, weirdest theme games ever, right? You're
Okay.
penguins running around a high school trying to catch other penguins because they don't have hall passes. Mm-hmm. That seems pretty weird. I would also like to throw out a sort of slipping around the side of the question and give it to an RPG. Millennial Apartment Hunters is a super fun RPG.
That's nice.
Which is about house hunters, but where everything is terrible because they're just terrible apartments that nobody has any money for. That's sort of unique in that particular aspect.
So I would say the most uniquely themed game I have ever played, I'm going to put an asterisk on because I haven't played it yet. Is that okay?
Maybe.
Millennium Blades. It's a simulation of collectible card games. That's a weird thing to go 2 levels deep into the meta on, and I freaking love the idea. At some point, I want to actually play the dang thing, but I haven't got to there yet. For actual answer to that question, Thrash and Roll, I'm amazed how few rock band management style games there are in the world, or at least games that are worth their salt. It was actually a pretty fun game about managing a rock band and going to shows and stuff like that. That's a cool theme. Theme I would love to see incorporated into a game design. I want more kitchen management stuff. That's what I do in life. Kitchen Rush kind of stoked the fires a little bit, but I really want more. There's such a deep vein of options there, and I'm surprised that there isn't more restaurant management games in the world. Maybe I should make one. I'm not going to make one. I'm not a good game
You just
designer.
want a sandwich making game. We have Burger Up. I would like to see a game themed around a marching band. You've got so many different things that you can work with there. You've got the instrumentation, you've got the drill, you've got the makeup of all the sections, you've got costume changes, you've got, like, I feel like there's a lot of different things that you could work with there.
Okay.
And I don't know of anything that's themed around a marching band, so that would be kind of fun, right?
I like that. That would be fun.
Nerd.
Somebody out there, do that. All right. Ian Wallace-Moyer has 3 questions. I'm going to split them up and we'll talk about each of them individually. First off, how would you describe your current gaming tastes? Are there certain styles of games you will almost always play or enjoy? And how have those changed since you've been in the hobby, or even specifically since starting the podcast?
Okay. I can certainly say that there are certain types of games I will definitely steer away from.
Yeah.
Mostly social deduction games. I know those are not a thing that I generally tend to enjoy. I will almost always play anything that has engine building or that has a strong drafting component, as long as it looks like that game has, you know, something to it. Sushi Go is a fine game and it has a drafting component and I'll play it, but I'm not crazy about it. But if you take a drafting component and put it within the framework of a strong game, I'm usually going to play that.
Yeah, I would say, kind of similarly to you, I avoid social deduction to the point where I refuse to play a lot of social deduction games. I'm just like, no, this is going to be bad for me, and it's going to bring this whole game down, so don't put me in this game. I don't want to play Secret Hitler, I don't want to play Resistance, so on and so forth. If it's a deduction game that happens to be social, like 3 Laws of Robotics, I'm straight in. That's cool. And I don't play a lot of miniatures games because I just don't have time to set up and take down, and miniatures games are too much of a lifestyle for me, I think it is.
Yeah, I also definitely won't play Dudes on a Map games unless there's
same.
something really coercing me to do so. I will, however, play almost anything if you're willing to teach.
Yeah, true.
Which is something that has definitely changed since we've gotten into podcasting. Just the number of games we have to learn and teach to other people. Like, if you're going to teach me a game, I will sit down and play it at least once with you. May not play it twice, but if you can teach, I can learn once.
Something that I have changed is that I've actually started to get into RPGs. You know, I'm in a D&D campaign with you and a bunch of our friends now, which is something I had never really done before. I had never played any RPGs, and just being more and more in the hobby and playing, you know, tangentially RPG stuff like Legacy of Dragonholt or even Time Stories to a degree, getting a chance to get in there and do some RPG stuff has been really, really fun over the last few months. So I'm excited about that. Next question from Ian. Do you have a game that generally people dislike or pan as bad that you really enjoy, or even specifically that the other dislikes but that you love, and vice versa?
As far as things that people pan as bad that I absolutely just adore, the first thing that jumps to mind is Race for the Galaxy, which nobody is saying is a terrible game, or at least not that anybody that I've heard, but people are so hard on the iconography, and they're just like, oh, it's terrible to play with new people, and I would never play it with new people. I like to play it with people who know how to do it, but that's because I like to play the game with people who understand the strategy of the game.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm going to show you the iconography, I don't think it's that bad. So I guess that's my unpopular opinion, that I will play Race for the Galaxy a whole ton, even if it's... I don't think the iconography is that big of a problem.
I know a lot of people don't have the love for Among the Stars that I do. I mean, I think the game is fantastic, and I think a lot of people just play the base stuff, and they play this basic setup, and they're just like, meh, that was whatever. But I love how much cool combinations there are in that game as you get going in it. Obviously, I just talked about it for a long time in my top 10.
We both like Paradox as well, which is something I've heard almost nothing about.
Yeah.
So that's one that we both like, that I feel like other people think is at least average or haven't heard of or whatever. I think it's a good game.
Paradox is so good. I love that. Go find a copy of Paradox if you can. All right. I don't think we really have anything that I enjoy that you dislike or vice versa.
What do. It's farming in Carcassonne. Any Carcassonne that is farming heavy.
Okay.
Well, I mean, realistically, you think the city is the best Carcassonne, correct? You've just put it as your number 9?
Number 8, yeah.
Oh, okay. I have a hard time with that because it is essentially adding more area control to a game that I already didn't want area control in.
Fine.
So I feel like that is, like, farming in Carcassonne as the main mechanic is the thing that you love that I don't.
I guess for you, the thing that you love that I hate, it was Keyforge, and now I don't hate Keyforge anymore, so good job, Keyforge. I guess you did... I guess you did okay.
Yay.
Third question from Ian. What are your opinions on gaming furniture? For example, what is the best setting or table type for games, or your preferences?
Oh, I have strong opinions on gaming furniture.
Yeah.
Which is that we own a dining table.
Yeah.
We don't need gaming furniture.
We own a dining table, and we own a very good dining table. Like, I'm very happy that we can fit 8 around that dining table if we really need to in the room that it's in. And it works very well. I would love to have a gaming table if it made any sense at all for our house. It doesn't. And again, we have a very nice dining table. I know a lot of people don't, and if you have a big room that can fit a gaming table and you have people over enough to make it make sense, yeah, I can understand people having a gaming table. But we don't have a need for it, and you chose a really good table when we moved into this house, so that worked out well.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that they are very nice things that people like to have, but at the same time, for me, they feel like a much less multifunctional solution. Like, if you have space to put a gaming table, something like a game topper aside, where you can put it away. If you have space for a game table, I feel like you have space to put just a regular table, and just then you have a regular table that you can do anything on. You can wrap Christmas presents on it, you can have a holiday dinner on it, and you can also play games on it. The
one thing I would say is I would love to invest in a table-sized playmat or felt top surface just to be able to pick up cards. Tablecloth, pretty good, but tablecloths, especially like, a few of the ones we have, they move around so much.
Especially when the cat jumps off the table.
The cat does jump off and on of the table very frequently. So yeah, I mean, furniture, if you can fit it and it makes sense to you because you have people over to your house enough, sure, I'm all for it. But for us, not really necessary. So Alex, our friend Alex from the Dukes of Dice and Grey Fox Games, has 2 questions he has 1 question for me and 1 question for both of us. His first question is, why are you so obsessed with Passeraya Supermarket Manager? And I have to say, Alex, I'm a little disappointed because I did not bring it up in this entire episode, and you did. So maybe, sir, it is you who has the obsession with this game that I made you play that time.
I don't think that's how that works.
No, okay, in fairness, I love Passeraya Supermarket Manager because it does some interesting things with deck building, and I want to make sure people find out about this designer, Sei Hui Long, because, frankly, who else is going to talk about it if, people don't? He sold 100 copies of the game. It's a really good game that has some good ideas in it. It's not perfect, but I like it a lot, and I feel like people should play it because it does some cool things. And that's kind of how I feel about a lot of independent and small designers and publishers. Like, yo, let's talk about some of these little guys that are doing some cool things and move on from there. I mean, maybe this is just my craft beer background talking. I want to see the independents succeed a lot. But that's a story for a whole bunch of old episodes.
Well, I mean, lots of people in board gaming are independents as well.
Very true, very true. His other question that we can both talk about, what's your biggest goal for the show in the next 100 episodes? Can you even fathom another 100 episodes right now?
Yes.
It's just like this, but 100 more times.
Yes.
Yeah. My biggest goal for the show, I want to do something, well, this is your idea, honestly, more than it is mine, but doing something more interesting with the Carcassonne. There's a lot of space there. People don't talk about about Carcassonne as much as we wish they did, and it would be cool if we made people love Carcassonne.
Yeah, I mean, I can't go back and say again that we have a project we would like to get off the ground and follow through on in a way that it deserves.
Yeah.
With the Carcassonne. But it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of figuring out on our part. So in 100 episodes, I hope we will have figured that out.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost 4 years from now. We can probably do something in 4, maybe. Or we can forget about it for 3 years and just ignore it and hope that you don't come back and listen to this episode. Nailed it.
The other thing I was thinking about is that I would like to find a way to get people in the craft beer industry who are interested in board games, because there is actually more overlap than you would think, to be involved in the podcast. Maybe get a little bit more conversation going on there. Maybe focus on how people are integrating the two. I would like to bring it out from us on the craft beer side and take it to other people who are involved in board games as well.
Yeah.
That seems certainly something that would be more noticeable on the podcast side of things.
2 questions from Rafael Rosario. First off, what games would you recommend playing with strangers? And also, what games do you think work well with both strangers and close friends? When I saw this first question, the very first thing that came to mind is playing King Domino with strangers, because you don't know what level the gamer you're playing with. A lot of times if you play with strangers, obviously we run a lot of game nights, so this comes up pretty frequently. King Domino is, again, one of those that I always keep in the game bag for emergencies. If I need to play a game with some people, I don't know how they're doing with gaming, it's such a great, easy teach that does offer a good bit of strategy. It's a perfect thing to pull out. And frankly, I like to play it with anybody, anytime. I think it's still a good game.
I would say Azul for playing with strangers, because even if you don't know how into gaming they are, Azul is really easy to teach, but every time that we bring it out to new people, people find it interesting and they grab onto it, and it's done quick enough that if they're not really having a great time, it's done. If they are having a great time, it's going to get them to want to sink their teeth into something else.
I think Sagrada fills that space too.
Yeah, Sagrada has a little bit more of like brain lockup.
Okay.
Whereas Azul, especially if you're playing with the pre-printed side of Azul, you can just run through that super quickly. And it's always pretty obvious what you have available to you. Whereas Sagrada, you can just sit there and just stare at that, and your brain feels like it's made of lead. And so if you don't know that you're playing with people who are really fond of a puzzle, I feel like that could be a bit of a problem. Before answering the second question for strangers and close friends, I would have to say you have to evaluate how outgoing a person you are.
True.
My initial thought for that was Monikers, which is an amazingly fun game to play with a group of people, even if you don't know everybody in it.
Yeah.
As long as you have a couple of people that you can go to sort of get the energy up for the game. But if you are very, very introverted, do not play Monikers with strangers ever in your life. It will be hell on earth for you.
Yes.
But if you are looking to try to incorporate people who don't know the group into the group, that may be, like, if they're outgoing in any way, Monikers is a great way to incorporate people.
Yeah.
Other than that, I would say any table card game is a great way to include strangers. Like, even, we talked about Pikoko a couple of episodes ago, which is not my favorite card game by far, or something like Matryoshka. Anything like that where you sit down and you can have a conversation and play your card game out over the table, I feel like is a good thing, because it gets everybody into the same group.
Diamonds is a perfect one for that as well. That's a game we haven't brought in the game bag in a while. But it's so accessible to everybody who's ever played Hearts or Spades, and it does some interesting, cool additional things. It's been a while since we played Diamonds. Probably want to get that out again. All right, Fiona Dickinson from the Game Shelf blog. Go check out their blog. They do some really great reviews over there. And the thing that I love about it is both Fiona and Amy give their opinions on separate blog posts each week. So for the same game, one will do Tuesday, the other one does Thursday. Really fun stuff and fun to read. Fiona wants to know, what is the best beer-themed board game? I'm going to say Brewcrafters, primarily because Homebrewers hasn't got to us yet, but Brewcrafters is a good heavy Euro that really feels like brewery management to me. Obviously, I've never managed a brewery, but it has the pieces that I expect. You have the product analysis, you have the resource management, you have the crew management, you can build a tap room, you can do all this fun stuff, and it is a really strong game that it just doesn't get the talk that it needs, and I don't know why. Hopefully we can get more chatter about that in the near future. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to be cheaty then. I'm going to say Homebrewers because it was very fun. I really liked the attention to the cleanliness aspect that is involved in that. It felt like you were part of a homebrew club to me, even with the ridiculousness of the fact that sometimes you could throw all kinds of weird stuff into this beer and it would still be drinkable. Like, I really enjoyed it. It is perhaps not the most true to life beer-themed board game, but it's the one I have had the most fun playing. Brewcrafters is also very, very good. I guess it's just that that Dice Hate Me Greater Than Games beer line that we very much like.
Hey, they know what they're doing.
They do. But it's just, I haven't had as many opportunities to play Brewcrafters. I've played Homebrewers more, even though it's not out yet. But it will be soon, I promise.
All right, up next, BJ from Board Game Gumbo has a 3-pack of questions as well. First off, what is your second favorite con experience ever after playing Mars Open at Gen Con 2018, of course? Man, BJ, I know you're joking about that, obviously, because we're fun and we have, a lot of fun, but my time at Gen Con 2018 in that JW Marriott Open Gaming area was like the most fun I've ever had at Gen Con, because Gen Con is usually such a stressful convention that I could definitely see it being high up on my list of stuff of, top games or top con experiences ever. And also I schooled all of you at Mars Open, so I feel pretty good about that one.
You did do that. I'm going to actually say the Strike tournament from last year's Gen Con that Rolling Dice and Taking Names did at the Old Spaghetti Factory. They had gotten together a whole bunch of copies of Strike, and they broke everybody out into tables, and each table had a winner, and they went in. It was a tournament. Why am I describing what a tournament is? It was a really excellent time, and there was so much energy in that room. It was absolutely packed, and we were playing for whether it was gladiators in an arena or dice in a bowl, and the winner got the first copy of Impact, which is the new implementation of Strike. It was a super fun time, and everybody, strangers and friends alike, was having a great time playing this game. Whether or not you think it's the greatest game on the face of the planet, it was a really good moment.
I would say one of my other favorite con experiences, to give something that BJ didn't talk about, was demoing City of Gears at PAX Unplugged last year. It was the first time I've ever done demoing, and I mean, my voice was shot by the end of the weekend because I had explained that game so many times, but it was so much fun being able to share the love of gaming with so many people in such a short period of time. Long-term gamers, completely new to gaming, everybody coming by and checking that thing out. We had a lot of fun. It was a great game, and we had a ton of fun just getting people excited about this new thing. So I'll, hopefully be able to do some demoing again in the future, here and there as it allows, but that was a lot of fun. So I really want to, thank everybody who played at a game at that particular one. BJ's next question: what makes a memorable convention game experience? Is it the game, or the people, or something funny, interesting, or unusual during the game? Yes. I think yes is the answer. It's all those things, right?
I think it depends on what convention you're talking about.
Okay.
If you're talking about something like Geekway to the West, or like you were saying, Gaming Hoopla, or even Whose Turn Is It Anyway? Those experiences are more about the people that are playing the game, I think.
Yeah.
Because you can actually sit down and you can get involved in those games, and you can really enjoy the group that you're playing with. I feel like at a convention, something like Gen Con, a memorable experience is either where the game absolutely floors you, because a lot of times you don't know who the people you're playing with are.
Yeah.
Or if it's friends that you don't get to see except for at these giant big conventions. If it is a game-related memory, it is because the game is just through the roof good. If it is a experience-related memory, I think it's a lot of times just the people that you're with.
Yeah. I think, one of my very favorite things about cons is, like you said, getting to see people that you don't see too often and hang out with them. Most of my fondest gaming memories are hanging out with you and Shane at Gen Con. It's continually awesome. You know, like we played Junk Art on a random table upstairs near the Stonemeyer Games
Yeah, I
room that
remember
one
that.
night. Or when we kind of wandered into the Project 5959 that turned out to be Unlock years later. You know, we did those things together, and they were such good experiences, and we just had so much fun together. But, like, the most memorable gaming experiences are the ones that are different than just playing a game at home, to me. You get to see people you don't see, or you get to play a game you wouldn't get to play, or some crazy person across the room does something funny and you all remember it.
Yeah, it's certainly that. I feel like a weird thing happening is less of a convention memory. Unless it has something to do with one of the players, which is one of the other things he said.
True.
Because weird things happen here.
All the time. Look at that cat. All right, third question from BJ. What's your Grail beer? This is something we don't really think about very often, and frankly, I will confess, like, I don't have a wanting for more beer. We kind of have access to things we want, and I've gotten out of the point where I am stalking down, as a quote, whales. I don't care about whales. I don't care about fancy beers that I can't have, because I've kind of come to the conclusion that the best beers are probably within 2 hours of me, and the beers that are the best within 2 hours of me are probably being done equally as well somewhere else. Like, I have access to Skillet Donut Stout and Hoot and Hammer from Burial, some of my very favorite beers of all time. I have some of the best IPAs in the world within a few hours of here, with Noda and Wooden Robot and Legion doing some amazing stuff in Charlotte. We have great sours everywhere in the Carolinas, and I could go down to Orpheus if I wanted to Atalanta anytime. I don't have a need for Grail beers so much anymore, because this is the great thing about craft beer, is that everybody can do as well as they want.
That is a cheap answer.
Yes. What do you got?
There is a 5 IPA that Boiler did that I had a couple of years ago.
All right.
That I only had because I was out there for a wedding. And it was definitely on my best beers of the year list that year, which I'm guessing was 2017?
Probably.
I don't think it was last year. So if I could have that again, I would definitely do it in a second, but I don't think they'll ever even make that again. So I guess that's the Holy Grail beer. What Jake said is all very, very true. I did not mean to belittle his statement, because so much of craft beer is freshness, and because it's about the care that is put into the beer. To be like, oh, I want to have this beer that I don't really know anything about the people who make it, or I don't really know how recently it was made, but this is the one I want, no matter of all of those things, is kind of silly. But if we're gonna actually give an answer, I want that thing from Boiler again, because it was good. Oh, actually, I should probably check things before I start talking about them. It's called Quintuple Dog Dare, and 11 people have drank it this month.
Ooh.
So if you're in Nebraska, in the Lincoln area, maybe go check it out.
So you're saying there's a chance.
It's very good.
If I had to pick a Grail beer, it is a 5-year-old Burton Baton from Dogfish Head. No matter what year it is, I want the one that's 5 years old.
Fair enough.
Good job, that beer. Adrian Richardson from the Mile High Game Guys has another beer-related question. What's the furthest you've traveled specifically for beer? I had to think about this one for a second. I think if I had to pick a thing that was the furthest I've specifically traveled for beer, it's when, on our honeymoon, we walked like 1.5 miles to go to Moondog Brewing in Melbourne, Australia. Because,
Are you counting from home?
Yeah, I mean, no, but we couldn't get a bus directly there or something, so we had to it was 98 degrees or something. It was crazy hot, and we're just like, no, I want to go check these guys out. They seem like they're doing some cool stuff.
It did feel real stupid at the time.
But it was so much fun.
It was. I love that we did that.
Mm-hmm.
The furthest that I've gone specifically for beer is when we went to Boston, because I had bought you a membership into the Night Shift Beer Club, and we had to go up there to pick up your beer.
Oh, we did do that just for that, didn't we?
We did. We also visited a friend of mine who is in Boston, but we went there because if we didn't pick up your beer by the end of the year, you weren't going to get it, and we went in late November.
That is a very good point.
Because it was very cold in Boston.
I completely forgot about that. So I did drive to Boston that one time. All right, John Jewell, a local designer to us with Corncastle Games, asks, what's the saddest you've been when spilling a drink on a game? I mean, mine's probably the Arcadia Quest moment. We were playing Arcadia Quest with Andrea and Josh did something that tapped the box cover that was standing up for a picture, and it fell onto a very dark beer.
Oh, God.
You remember this now?
Yeah, now I remember it.
But, I mean, that's the saddest I've been, because honestly, it cleaned up okay. We just kind of aired out all the pieces and all of the cards, and Yeah, but that did happen, and it did kind of damage stuff a little bit. So that's the saddest I've been, I guess.
I would say the saddest I've been, and I'm going to leave out specifics to avoid incrimination, was we had a prototype of a game that was sent to us that we had brought to a game night. And one of the players at the game had knocked over her glass, which I believe was just water, if I remember correctly. So I guess it's not technically a beer on a game. And
It does say a drink.
I could not see from where I was that it ended up being fine. Like, the pieces were all okay. It turned out fine. There was one that was moderately moist, and it got dried out, no problem. But for the second, I thought it was beer, and I thought it was all over, and I was very sad for a moment.
Yeah, okay.
But trust us, it only happened once, and it was water.
All right, so, as is tradition, Patrick Hillier gets the final word. If you don't already, go listen to Patrick and Eric in the Morning, which is their month-ishly show that Patrick and Eric Buscemi do on the What Did You Play This Week podcast feed. Go check that out.
They got a good jingle.
They's good guys. Patrick wants to know 3 things. 1, how old is the live studio cat?
He is 11.
He's adorable. He's so cute. Look at him having little paws out.
He's 11.
I just want to go to sleep, man. Can I go to sleep yet?
No, not yet. What was the hardest game to pair an adult beverage with?
That is anything that has a generic theme.
Yeah.
Which is a generic answer. But, I mean, honestly, probably role player.
Yeah.
Because I hate to do on taps that could really relate to anything that is of that theme. So I like to pick beers that go specifically with a game. But role player is so generic in its theming. It's high fantasy. So picking beers for role player is picking beers for D&D, is picking beers for pretty much anything that has those character classes. So to find things that felt unique enough, and I'm sure I probably, if I went back and look at that list right now, would be like, oh, that's generic as heck.
Yeah.
But there is no specifying in that game. So that was probably the one that felt the hardest to me to do.
We have had a few games that we wanted to put on tap, but straight up didn't do because we were having such a hard time finding beers for them. Honestly, none of them come to mind right now, but I know that like there's been a few in the last year or so that we've looked and we've got like 2 beers and we're like, this is literally all we've got. And I've been kind of surprised, like, you know, some things you would expect to have a whole ton of beer stuff. And it might even be because of, like, beer naming and labeling legal requirements. That some of that stuff
there
doesn't
are
exist.
definitely some that legal requirements have. Like, anything that is medical related is very difficult to find beer for because you can't name your beers most of the time after medicine. So stuff like Mama's Yellow Pills somehow gets around that. I don't know how Oscar Blues managed to do that.
I just got that. Oh, that's great.
Really? You just got that?
Never really thought about that one.
But most of the time, like, you can't have a beer that's called, like, medicine.
Or strength.
Or strength.
Poison.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So anything that has a medically named theme is hard to come up with. A lot of times, if we put something on tap that's not the main feature, it's because I tried to do it on tap, and there was not enough stuff that I felt thematically connected, or there was, and they weren't good enough. Because I'm not going to put stuff on and on tap if they're not good.
Cool. All right, the final question. How many puns has Jake made in the show to date?
Too many. Not enough?
Not enough, just pun or 2. And that wraps up episode 100 of Draft Mechanic. Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate all the love that we've gotten over the last 100 episodes. If you want to get in touch with us, draftmechanic.net, @draftmechanic on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We have a website and an email address. It's draftmechanic@gmail.com. There we go. I'm slowly remembering things.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild that is guild number 2470. So if you want to drop us a line there. If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we do twice monthly meetups. Our next one is on Tuesday, May 21st at Salud Cerveceria.
Yeah, and we will be at Geekway to the West 2 weeks from the episode dropping here. We will be there a little less than 2 weeks. Holy moly, it is coming up real fast. I have to drive to Illinois soon, don't I? Oh boy. Anyway, yeah, we'll see you there. Come to the Bottle Share Thursday night and just get in touch with us on the internet if you want to play some games. I will bring Carcassonne the City. I will bring Among the Stars. I don't know what else I'm going to bring because I haven't thought that hard about it yet.
Some things.
All right, Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Visit greyfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest. Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. After 100 episodes, I think we can finally call this one done, yeah?
No.
No?
As always, I would like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that I'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
I'm down with that. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Draft Mechanic episode 100 is recorded on Sunday, May 5th, 2019 for the 100th time in front of a live studio cat.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Punchboard Media,
where we all
bring something
to the table.
pull up a chair
at punchboardmedia.com.